self-insured. I mean, I would say that this dollar amount here is directly just because of the fixed cost due to the RFP process.
Administrative.
Then there's also going to be, for individual plans, there's been some changes to the plan designs, which will yield some further savings. And that's in fact what's being calculated now as we speak. So it's both those things, plus being able to comfortably use reserves to mitigate what would have been an increase.
So there may even be greater savings than we'll learn about down the pike.
In the big picture, yes.
So you're telling me you could have budgeted lower if you get some more savings?
Well,
Is that what you just said?
Peter, that's what I suggested.
What we're saying is that we have a multi-year process that's rolling out, because we're adding a new plan, a third option, and we expect to continue to save, because as we have 3-year contracts that we have premium contribution rates by staff going up. We also have plan design changes, and as people decide which plan they want to move into, we don't yet know where to predict how many will be in which plan. So it's a year-by-year process of seeing how this.
So during this year, you could see savings if people move in, and then you can, in the following year,
project out again.
Right.
Take
From the teacher contract perspective, in the 3-year estimate from Limburg and Ripple, we would achieve $1 million total savings in health insurance related savings.
This kind of savings is the best for the budget because it has no program impact.
Correct.
And it's just, it's good for the taxpayers, and it has no impact on the school, so that's the best
Absolutely.
kind you can go for.
Right.
The non-educational expenses, which you're going to present on further after Matt's presentation, right?
We have a document for you to review.
Yep.
So you're, in summary, what you're really telling us that there are a lot of moving parts to this issue here.
Right.
And we're sort of sticking our toe in the water to see how much we are going to be able to do over a course of a couple of years, right?
Yes, and it really just from the budget perspective for next year, maybe the simplest way to explain it is we would have been talking about a significant increase in rates if we were just looking at our claims history, which we had 2 very good years. Now we've had a tougher year.
Right.
And because we would have started with something like a 7%
Increase.
Trend rate.
Yeah.
Then looking at a
That's the
combination
word
of
used.
reserves and these savings, we're able to make that all the way down to that 0. So that's why we're really confusing two different things. One is budgeted dollars, and the other is the total savings and projections to this total plan.
Right.
So those are complicated things, but we're doing our best to explain it.
I just want to say thank you for working with the Board of Selectmen. I know you felt last time we were putting a lot of pressure on you about collaboration, and I know this is something you've been working on for
Right.
many months, and it's not just in response to us, but it's absolutely the right direction
Great.
to go in, and I think you deserve great credit and gratitude for your efforts in this area.
Thanks.
Linda, I can tell you that the insurance committee has been talking about this for 4 or 5 years now.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, this
Right.
has been a
Long
long,
time coming.
and
Yeah.
part of it's because of the contract negotiations, but a lot of it is really just getting over the hump, so to speak, that we got to have 2 different carriers.
But I think it's important to applaud you for it and encourage you to do more of this sort of collaborative effort.
Next section is just a review, and none of this information is new, but to touch on it again are the main drivers of the budget. So there was the reduction of the FTE, which really helped us to offset the salary increases. The salary increases of the teacher contract alone, I'll show you the numbers in a second, we're close to $1 million, which obviously was our largest driver because that's the largest staffing pool that we do have. This budget allows us to increase access to technology for our students and our teacher. I'll talk a little bit about new technology money. Allows us to appropriately staff some special ed program needs that are actually current year needs as a result of some new enrollment and some new move-ins and happenings that we need to adjust for current year, and then a budget appropriately for next year, and of course, new contractual obligations. So this is the snapshot of the financial knowns. Again, this is information we've taken a look at before, but you can see on the top of the slide are the additions. This is with the assumption that we roll forward the organization at the same size. So you can see the first several items, negotiated contracts with our various bargaining groups, nurses, custodians, and that's our paraprofessional and clerical group. Impact of the teachers' negotiated contract, our administrative negotiated contract increase total of $54,000, an estimated increase of contracts yet to be settled. Those are really our unaffiliated employees that we decide on an annual basis.
As well as our bus contract.
Yep, in our bus contract, thank you. And then an estimated increase in retirement contributions to our defined contribution and defined benefit plans. Program improvement cost drivers, $750,000 or a 1.16% increase. I'll talk specifically about those in a moment. But all that rolled together is 3.27. And then we take a look at the various areas that we've talked about tonight to peel off that cost and reduce that cost. So the modular removal, utility savings, bus routes, the various operational efficiencies that we spoke of. But then, of course, the large drivers are the non-certified position, the staff retirements, and then the decrease in the 12 certified positions of over $900,000. So you net those two numbers out, and that's where we have the 1.05% increase. So when we talk a little bit about, the next slide, the program improvement cost drivers, and when I had come initially to the Board of Finance and provided an overview, I shared some of this information with you, and to go into a little more detail on it tonight. Two main areas we're looking at this year to fund supports for. They are some of our special education programming and some of our technology needs. So in special education, we have a program called Ready, Set, Go. Ready, Set, Go program has been a very successful program for us, located at two of our elementary schools, located at Squadron Line School and Tooten Hills School. And Ready, Set, Go services a certain segment of our autistic population, with students starting in preschool when they come to our system and moving through sixth grade. Very specialized instruction, very comprehensive program. These students remain in our district if all goes well and we're meeting their needs throughout high school, and then even transitionally until they're 21. So one thing we feel very strongly about is the need for a program facilitator. We had a program facilitator in this program at one time. We had reduced that position, or kind of reallocated it actually for a different function within that program. And we just believe from a transitional standpoint, a need to provide support to students, staff through professional development, and really serve as a conduit of communication for our parents. Many of these students are nonverbal. And we just need a high level of interaction with staff and parents to create the relationship and the conditions for these students to be successful in our school district. So that's an extremely important priority for us. We've also, and I'll get into a little more detail on it in the next slide, we've seen a significant increase in enrollment in students in this program, an increase of 22% from October of this year. And I'll show a graphic that demonstrates that in a minute. The second piece is the cost of the technology, which includes two different areas: a repair technician. As we have increased the number of devices significantly over the course of the past several years, we have not increased the staff needs, and thus have kind of decreased the service model a little bit in terms of readiness for our staff. So that's something we want to take a look at. And we have $125,000 in there for new devices, Chromebooks, which are devices that get you online quick, ready access for students and teachers, and will really help us with this new testing platform and mandate we're being faced with. So I have a little more detail in the next couple slides. This is just a slide that kind of represents that growth pattern of the Ready, Set, Go program. So we started October 1 of this year, when we lock in our enrollment, with 27 students in the 2 elementary schools. And as you can see, moving through December, we had move-ins and new students come to us, peaking out with 6 additional students, or a 22% growth. So this is something that has impacted our ability to service the needs of students. These are students that, for the most part, require adult assistance throughout the day, throughout most of the day, to really create that kind of inclusion environment that we want for our students. So we've had to find a way to work within our current operating budget and staff the services, and even change a little bit of the delivery model in paraprofessional service to kind of move through this year, but definitely need to make some adjustments for next year. So the balance of that other money in that area would be for support staff or for paraprofessionals. We can do that with some combination of part-time, maybe full-time people. That's something we're looking at creatively in the way we can reduce costs, but we have $180,000 allocated there to roll forward into next year. Yes?
Matt, how do you budget for ups and downs in this program?
It's a great question. It's challenging. We did a pretty large scale, what we called, what was the actual title? Like kind of a review of our special services program, an overview, 4 or 5 years ago, to really look for some efficiencies. And I think during that time is when we created a new reading intervention program, and we cut a significant amount of paraprofessional staff at that time, about 40 full-time equivalent positions. Really trying to go to a staffing model that accurately represented the needs we had at the time. In doing that, I think it helped us from budgeting purposes and efficiency purposes. It tied our hands to respond to situations like this. So when this occurs, we look to grants. We look to our IDEA grant first. The IDEA grant is kind of a 2-year roll grant that has some carryover that we go to in terms of kind of an emergency situation like this, which is what we did this year. You can't do that 2 years in a row, because then you have absolutely no way to respond to that in the future. So that's one way that we do that. Other way, Peter, quite honestly, is we relook at how we are currently allocating staff and resources and make movement throughout the year. It's definitely created some significant challenges this year. It's a model where we used to have a 1-to-1 correlation for these students. Right now, we do not have that as we work through this current year, and that's something I think we need to look at for these students, particularly when they come to us in preschool to be successul.
Matt, just to follow up on your slide there.
Yeah.
On October 1st, we had, we do our census of our population. Am I to understand that the additions here are individuals who have joined the school system
Moved to the
since that
Simsbury
time?
Public Schools, correct.
This is not just a question of us.
Not necessarily all move-ins. They may be in the community, have turned 3, and in a birth to 3 program under state statute, it's our responsibility then to meet the identified needs of those students within our school system. So you may have a combination of current Simsbury residents already that were preschoolers,
Okay.
and we had several move-ins as well.
I want to ask about those move-ins, because I think there's, obviously, it's a bigger issue than just our budget, but there's sort of state policy issue here around how special ed is reimbursed. And I applaud our school system for doing the right thing by kids with special ed. I also know that from, my years as a
Right.
legislator,
Right.
constituents who weren't even in Simsbury yet contacting me about, we're moving there because you've got the best system for kids with special needs. And while I think that on the one hand, that's something to be proud of, it's also on the other hand, something that's a budgetary problem if other towns are not stepping up to the plate.
Right.
And therefore, people are moving away from those towns to our town and bringing their children, their special needs children with them, and they're not bringing that town's financial backing with them, if you will. And so I'm just wondering,
Yeah.
at the state policy
I mean,
level.
I can say this,
how you're addressing this.
I've met with our legislators, and I have another meeting actually in a few weeks to really take a look at, it's the excess cost reimbursement
Right.
grant. And, I mean, it's complicated, but essentially, we are eligible for reimbursement for students
Yeah, I know
when
it.
the cost is in excess of 4.5 times their per pupil cost, so.
Most of these probably don't meet them. But even if
Some,
they do.
some do. The
They're full.
challenge is, Linda, and you'll know this from your time there, is that number, though, did used to be funded to 100%, and is now chipped away and has been somewhere between 75 and 80%. So, we strongly advocate, as a starting point to look at this, to fund that appropriately the way it used to be funded. That's an issue that impacts us on some students that we do not have the program capability to educate within our schools, and we are responsible for educating those students in an outplacement situation. Those are probably the tuitions that we talk about that can be in excess of $100,000, $120,000, along with transportation, which could be in excess of $35,000. So there's a significant cost there, and there is a mandated and a legislative aspect of that we need to continue as superintendents to advocate for, and we are.
Yeah, okay.
What's the piece, I mean, going from 100% to 75, do you have a rough idea how much more that costs us, the town?
It's
because we
about,
budget.
it's about 125,000 or so.
What costs us?
But I mean, the real issue is even if they don't ever get to that point where the state is funding,
Right.
they have,
You're
they're
responsible
four
for
and
the
a half
first
times as
70,000.
expensive as the average kid before the state even kicks in whatever it's
Lower
going to
that
kick
to 3.5
in.
and we'll-
So if we're attracting,
Yeah.
lots of people who are 4.5 times as expensive as average, that's going to drive our overall costs.
How do
I mean,
we-
these are students with clearly defined needs, so I think
Sure.
whatever district they're in, at least locally here, I know that districts are, obligated to meet those needs, and school systems want to meet those needs, and I know
And
our
some do a
board
better
wants to
job than
support
others, and we do a good job.
Is
Correct.
Ready, Set, Go unique to Simsbury, or is that what we call our program?
That is what we call our program. It's a discrete trial program, which is a certain type of really intensive instruction for students. Many districts have, I don't know if it's a formalized program, but they will have an approach to work with students that have this type of disability within their district.
But it is a subset of the,
Overall
Greater
autistic
special ed.
population.
Yes.
Absolutely.
I mean, I'm just looking at this graph that you
Right.
have here. This is 110 kids in this program.
Correct.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So when you think of special ed overall, it's a program with, just like regular ed, with various levels of support and systems and programs that meet the needs of all our kids. And, one of the goals you want to do is not pull special education out and compare it to regular education. It's how do you build your program so that those students can be successful within the programs and offerings that you have. It's not like running two parallel systems.
Am I doing incorrect math if I take, this is the pyramid thing that was in your,
Right.
this is showing just shy of $9.9 million.
Right.
And if we've got 110 or so kids, we're talking about $89,000 to $90,000 per child, right?
Let me just take an eye at the
Is
graphic you're
that
looking at.
sort of the,
So, the graphic you're looking at is a graphic of, but hold on, the one that shows the increase of 105 students, I believe those are our students with autism. We have many more students with special education than just autism.
okay.
So if you think of an overall percentage and a
The
comparative.
slides here are not real clear as to what the size of the program is. I mean, you've given,
Yeah.
I've got a dollar figure here, but I don't really have an understanding of the number of children that are in the
Yeah.
program.
So,
We have this slide, which is.
so overall, about 12% of our students have some sort of special need of varying degree, which is a comparative statistic to a statewide trend. But that could go from something very, very minor to something very significant. But that 105, to your point, Nick, is the students with autism. And that was part of a presentation to demonstrate to our board that is one area where we have seen a significant increase, as statewide national trends have seen everywhere.
Yeah, that graph is stunning.
Yeah.
I mean, it looks like it's doubling every 4 years, which is pretty amazing.
Another area that the district plans for on an annual basis, and I referenced it just a few moments ago, are students that we do not service within our district, but service at outside placements or out-of-district tuitions. So we have seen an increase in that number this year, an increase of about 5 students. Again, we've had to adjust for that. This year, Linda, this is a place where probably that excess cost would come more readily, readily into play in terms of reimbursement dollars. But this has certainly posed a challenge in our planning this year, and we're asking for increased funding next year to help alleviate some of that challenge moving forward. And this isn't unlike what we're seeing in other districts. I think more complex situations, and with that, actually more specialized schools and businesses being created on the outside that provide a different type of resource that are coming into play.
Let me make a distinction. Are we talking about special education still?
In most cases, yes, not in all.
These are
in
special
most.
needs children. I mean, I'm trying to differentiate between a child whose parents, they say, I just want my perfectly normal child to go to a magnet school in Hartford.
This does not involve that at all.
Okay.
Yes.
Not the same kind of autism.
Got it, Lydia. Okay. Technology is the last piece of the kind of new dollars that we're requesting for review. We have a few things to consider here. When we think about technology, we think about the broad brush of assessment, learning, and teaching, and how the three all come together to join kind of a partnership. Smarter Balanced, the assessment consortium, is the new testing platform. In the next couple weeks here, we're going to be engaging in a pilot of that. The legacy test, the Connecticut Mastery Test, and the CAP test are going away. And this is the new testing platform, which is completely done online, individualized tests that's supposed to kind of scale out performance by individual child. It's in alignment with the new Common Core standards. Quite frankly, we have a lot of unanswered questions thus far about the assessment because we haven't seen it in its entirety, but we do know it's put quite a taxing burden on technology infrastructure and our ability to have ready access to get through the testing so that you don't have to shut down your entire operation for weeks at a time to assess students. So we're looking to increase the amount of Chromebooks and increase some of the staffing levels that go with servicing the overall needs of our technology that's out in the field. You can see the significant increase in devices, and this is everything. This isn't just computers. This is, we have clickers that our math teachers are utilizing, printers, document cameras, smart boards, just a significant commitment to technology over the past several years, but not an increased level of servicing. And I can say, and our board is aware, that we have had a challenge meeting needs when we have equipment failure or we have issues in the field. And our overall goal is to ensure that we have ready access, when the time is right and there's a teachable moment and things are working and students are engaged. So we're trying to create that environment and do a better job of that moving forward.
How many devices roughly?
The devices are listed
Right there.
there. You see the increase from 2008 to 2014. We now have 5,439 total devices.
But how many devices?
In this proposed.
This funding would be about 100, how many Chromebooks?
It's about an additional 300.
300?
I believe it's about 150 of this. Yes, for
150 Chromebooks? Is it- Okay, 150.
For this budget?
Yes. Yeah.
They have
all you get.
a useful life of what, 3 years or more?
It's 175,000 of Chromebooks is 350.
Okay.
Yeah, they're not.
Useful life on a Chromebook? have we-
I think we're anticipating.
They're
that
new
we're
to the
gonna
market
get
last
5
year,
to
so 5
5 to
years.
7, somewhere in that.
So
So
do you
they're
have
how
a
much
regular
each?
program of
$175.
turning them over like the school buses?
We will once
Right.
we reach that.
Will this be a recurring item in your
75,000
budget?
divided by
350?
Well, that's where I was going to.
Yeah,
Is this you're now up to?
We need to really take a look, I think, to Nick's point about what a replacement plan will look like for this in the future, and that's kind of work
you may recall.
long-term planning we're looking at now.
You may recall in July, I was before you talking about our goals in these single devices and trying to move towards having more access in each building. So that's a plan that we're going to try to continue to move forward on. We're not at the level of replacement yet. We're still trying to get to the level
Right.
of what's that good number to have.
So they're about $500 a piece, these
Yes,
Chromebooks?
they're
Right.
a little bit less than that.
So 5,439 devices that each last somewhere between 5 and 7 years?
No, these devices include our smart boards, our
Right.
document cameras, our desktop computers, our laptops, our iPads,
All sorts of.
projectors,
This is everything we
and
have.
Chromebooks.
From a service
and
standpoint.
printers,
Still.
and all those devices combined have to be serviced in various ways. They all have different useful lives.
Right, but most of them not 10 years.
Most
So-
of them not 10 years.
so
but
if you
we've
start
had a
to-
lot of We've had a lot of things that we've stretched the life a long
Which is
time.
great, and,
Longer than-
right, we should stretch it as long as we can, but we ought to have a plan for that whole, and when we're thinking
Right,
long-term,
so
5
in our,
years
so
out.
in our operating budget, you'll see a new line item under the maintenance of plant that is technology replacement. And that's exactly for that reason, to be tracking the amount to spend on replacement of devices as well as the new technology spending, which is in our Group 12 for new equipment. So you'll be hearing, or probably discussing some of that.
And the last is just a recap of the 1.05% increase. And just to reiterate, we were pleased that, our initial planning of a 1.48 we felt was responsible in terms of what the district needed to sustain program and move forward in those areas of special ed. And with the technology and with the insurance savings, able to come down and essentially meet the target point that we felt you had discussed with us at that last meeting. We feel pretty good about from a Board of Education side. So with that, I know we have questions. We have, our team here and our supplementary materials to go in any direction you want to take the conversation.
Why don't we, you have the books, everyone, I assume, got the books to study over the weekend, gave us our homework.
Peter, can I just ask one follow-up question? Was the only change between the 148 and the 105 the insurance program?
Yes.
As far as asking questions, how about if we go one person at a time? Or do you want to?
Well, let's do it all at once, talk over each other.
Seriously, she's got a good point. I mean, sometimes her question will spark a
No,
question
no,
from.
I'm kidding.
Yeah, but sometimes, you're right, people want to further explore, but, want to start that in, Barb? You want to start? Any questions?
I'll defer to Nick, because I know he's got the longest list.
Okay.
And then what we miss,
Nick, you've already been exposed.
He just does his homework.
Well,
You get the largest number of questions for us, so we would, between, we got the book, so that.
well, what the other five of you four of you don't know is that one of the things I did ask Matt and Burke to sort of try and lead me through is on the teacher salaries. I was really just, we're talking about a $28 million number that hasn't changed much. And it's got 8 retirements and 4 other reductions and got all the salary increases and so forth in it. And I was just sort of trying to, in my mind, to work through how that all, works together. And why don't you go through this just quickly?
Okay, so to use the resources in this budget booklet as well as this handout, on page 19, which is the yellow section, in those notes, we talk about the line item regarding teacher salaries. So it is a net decrease of $13,352, and the verbiage here talks a little bit about what is behind it. This illustrates the dollars. So we saw in our major drivers that we estimate the savings from 8 teacher retirements to reduce the budget needs by $200,000. And then, as was also in our major drivers, a reduction of 12 teachers, K-12, is an estimated savings of $921,360. So those are the deducts, and then looking to add in the cost of the teacher contract settlement of $1.8 million. And then in our budget request for those program drivers, the Ready, Set, Go program facilitator position is an additional 108. So that is how that's showing how you get to that net of $28,308,585. And then if you look at the number of FTE certified, the retirements are being filled, so you don't count the 8. Those are not reductions in total number of people. It's just different people doing that job. And then the 12 FTE that are being reduced, K-12, you add 1 Ready, Set, Go certified person, so it's a net reduction of 11 FTE in our certified.
But just go back to the 8 teacher retirements. The 200,000 reflects the fact that 8 higher grade teachers are retiring, and you're
Right.
replacing them with.
The estimated value of that, and
Like a step 5 middle level.
is
Yep.
25,000 for
Can I
our
just ask, the 108,000, is that inclusive of benefits?
No, this
stipends
is,
and benefits, right?
this is just salaries, right?
And benefits.
Well, it doesn't have health and pension in there, does it?
For the
108, he said.
for the purposes of this just macro numbers, we tried to show the simplest net change to this.
So you're not saying one person's salary is 108,000, you're saying their total compensation package, including benefits, is
Right.
108,000?
Right.
So part of the 108 really belongs in other controls.
Right, for the sort of major driver categories,
We
we
lumped it.
don't split it out. We're just trying to show you
Just makes it easy.
Yeah, that's why
For explanation.
the savings, keep in mind that each year, we talk about the average teacher salary, okay? So that savings above is also inclusive of savings of salary plus benefits. So it works both ways within this macro calculation.
Now, underlying all of your projections are someplace in your materials, you're expecting the student population to decline by 77 children.
Right.
Is that correct?
Correct.
How do you get to that number? Because, I mean, I've read the New England study projection that you did, 3 or 4 years ago? I've
Right.
seen Dr. Prouda's projection. All of those are suggesting that in the current years, you should be seeing reductions of 100-plus kids, not 77. Last year, you made a projection that it would be, I think it was 112. The professionals are saying that it would be substantially more than that. I think it was 141 I saw on one projection, and we actually got 171. So I have trouble with the math here in terms of the way we really get to where, what should be in there.
So for current year, for us to project next year, we work with NASDAQ, which is a company we work with on an annual basis. So that 77 is a number that they provided us through their projection.
The numbers that I see are, at least, unless there's an updated version of the study I saw done 2 or 3 years ago.
But you do them
has-
annually. You do them annually for the budget. So like when I said for the facilities enrollment, to your point, we projected, I think, 140 decline. It came in at 177. So we take our October 1 data every year, go back to NASDAQ, say you need to make any adjustments in this trend line for next year. So we go long range, 5 to 10 years, to give us an idea. For budget planning purposes, we go annually. I will say, last year that they were off. You know what I mean? So we came, and what we're taking a look at is saying, have we seen a difference now in this in-migration, out-migration pattern that usually yielded an up about 40 on an annual basis. We didn't see that last year. On a one-year basis, you could kind of say, okay, that makes sense. We need to continue to look at that moving forward. But Nick, we do that on an annual basis, that 77 number, and I can get you the stuff right from NESDEC. That's the number we use, and then we roll it backwards into our buildings, and we update that on an annual basis.
Can you share with this board, because I know I've heard it, because we asked it on the Facilities Task Force.
Yeah.
Historically, how accurate has NESDEC been?
Within,
It's really quite high. It's not, hasn't been this last year, but.
Personally,
what is it?
I don't think that.
Within 1%? I mean, it's been close. The last couple years have been a little further off than we had been historically,
Right.
which, to Barbara's point, we push them on a little bit in terms of the assumptions that they're using. They put a lot of data in the mix. You know, they're looking at housing developments, they're trying to analyze trends, they look at birth rates. We have a close eye on our kindergarten cohort this year. It's supposed to see an uptick for 1 year and then go back down based on the birth rates. Sue Lemke and I are keeping a close rate on that. If that doesn't come in as we thought, I think we really do need to take a look at, okay, what assumptions are we using here if we said we have a 3-year run that wasn't as close to what we've
Matt, it looked like
usually seen.
in the data that the variance was in the junior high and high school, what they projected to what actually happened, that was the greatest variances.
Yeah,
So somehow whatever data they used there didn't bear out.
yeah.
And
That would-
can I ask
Well,
a-
they're the largest schools,
Yes, if you,
so you know what I mean? So if you looked at your overall elementary, it would close that gap a little bit.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? But,
Yeah.
understood.
And can I ask a question about this from a budgeting perspective, being new?
Sure.
If you build your budget on an expectation of a decline of 77 kids, and
Yeah.
it turns out to be 150 kids,
Right.
you still get to keep the entire amount of money that were budgeted for, right? We don't go
Right.
back and say, wait a minute, you didn't actually have as many kids, and so you had more money that you needed, is that correct?
That's correct.
I think though, but I'm not going to speak for you, but that's when he looks at teacher cuts. Those decisions are made based on projected enrollment.
Yeah,
Right.
sure.
So- so let me
You
just-
can't cut a teacher mid-year, I
Right,
understand that.
But when you look at the significant number of reductions, and we've talked a little bit about this before, of 12 teaching positions, you wouldn't, I say it's safe to say normally, see a reduction of 12 teaching positions based on a projected reduction of 77 students. So I think you're seeing almost a year lag of, okay, we were off by about 49 or 50, we're projected to go down 77, roll your classes forward, what do they look like? You can now take more positions and still stay within those guidelines. So that's where I said, you know, we really offset the entire teacher contract salary increase this year due to enrollment-driven reductions. But when I look at 77, if that held true, I can safely say that wouldn't yield like a net 12 in classroom teaching positions. It's kind of a 2-year run.
But if you get a number over 100, or like this last year, 171, I mean, that's going to, at least in my mind, suggest that we should be pulling back next year. Does that make sense?
I think you'd have more reductions than you would,
Yeah.
yes. Yeah.
I mean,
And I think we'd also have to really take a look at the projections, to be honest with you.
Well, I spent a lot of time looking at the class loading information you've got, and quite frankly, I find it really very impressive that you've been able to keep the class sizes and so forth pretty well in, you know, in the right range. I guess what I see is that whereas a year or two ago, you had very few classes that were over and quite a number that were under, you're sort of getting back to what I would call more of a balance, I guess.
I would say overall, yes, we're seeing some smaller classes in our upper elementary levels, which have some larger class size guidelines, but as those cohorts have moved through, we've been able to kind of tighten that up a little bit and right-size it.
Maybe what would just give us a little sense of comfort, would you be willing to look at where NESDEC made the mistake last year? What assumptions did they have in there that were off?
I mean, we talked
Make sure
to
it's
them
not
at
back in there
length.
again.
We talked to them at length about that this year in terms of moving forward with planning for next year. The thing that we kind of, correct me if I'm wrong, Sue Lemke works closely with this, is we also track that in-migration, out-migration pattern, so people that move out and new people that move in. Historically, that had been a positive trend number from us, anywhere from 30 students to 35 or 40, correct? Last year, when we looked at that, in-migration, out-migration, it was flat.
Yeah, nobody wants to move.
So it was
here.
moving out, moving in, we're the same number. So that's something we need to take a close look at.
And what's the assumption in for the 77? Is it assuming in-migration again?
Certain degree, I don't know the exact adjustments they made. I mean, I can check on that from a mathematical standpoint, but they had all the information that we moved forward to them
But they update the study every year.
on an annual basis. So they don't always give us a 5 or 10-year run every year, but for an annual number, we get that every year.
Well, if they were projecting, for example, for this particular calendar year, that, I'm just picking a number,
Yep.
that the reduction in the expected reduction was, say, 2.5%.
Right.
Would you expect to see that change next year I mean,
So what we do is.
do they vary all over the place a lot? I mean, I
No,
guess
they've been really good
that's was
until
sort of my impression.
until the past year or so, when we had we were off a little bit more than we anticipated. But basically, what we do is we get a K-12 number. They work that back across schools. They work that back across grade levels, and then we roll our individual sections into that to see what variances we would have from that. So it's been a very productive tool for us for a long time. But I understand the question, knowing we were off 40 students or so last year.
An open choice, is that more our choice of how many come in, or is that open? Do you know? I mean, because I noticed in the budget here, you're budgeting for 5 more coming in for open choice.
Right. So that's a conversation that goes on an annual basis with the state. They certainly would like us to, I mean, they're requesting that we take, I think it was 40 some odd more students. The challenge I explained, and, we've been committed to the open choice program for a long, long time, and we've had great success with it. The challenge that I talked, and we just had a meeting last week with the state about, is we're in a situation where our enrollment is declining, and I showed them the same information I showed you today. As we decline, we need to capture teaching positions so we can come in as competitively as we can in our budget. So I can't open the doors across all various grade levels that would lead to adding staff and have that offset. So when we agreed to take students, this year what we did is we took siblings, young students of families we already have, limited number, as we're committed to doing that, and it didn't lead to additional teaching sections. And I think that's important for us in the short term when we plan. I mean, I know that's a program. Also, Linda, you'll know legislatively that there's an awful lot of discussion around the amount. Should it be a full per pupil cost? What are we going to do with magnet schools versus the open choice program with the chef case? It's all very complex. You have new buildings being built that compete against the open choice program, and I think decisions need to be made which way the state is going to fund these competing interests for the same
most
cause.
expensive way, that's.
So,
The reimbursement rate, though, will vary if the number of students goes down, correct? In other words.
or up,
Yeah.
either or.
There-
Yeah.
there's
If it goes up,
thresholds.
then the reimbursement rate is higher.
Correct. Correct.
But the reimbursement rate's not 100% of our cost.
No, but
It's
as long as-
No, but at the
$6,000.
margin, it actually is very helpful, because, I mean, as you're seeing, even with a decline in students, it's not like you automatically, all your fixed costs don't go away. So if you're
Right.
looking at marginal costs, I don't know that they're still at reaching marginal cost level, but, it's possible they are.
If you
Yeah, so-
can determine by grade level, you say, okay, well, we can't eliminate 2 positions in this grade due to the increase because of class size, well, then if you can take X number of students at that grade level, if you can dictate that would be helpful. I don't know if you
I mean,
can.
there's a lottery. It's definitely gotten more complex, Jeff, than in recent years. And the other thing is, we know that students are with us for a longer period of time. We foster better relationships with families, better relationships with students, and we think overall they'll be more successful. So we try to integrate through kindergarten, through preschool, and, but there's not as many opportunities there.
Nick, do you have any more questions on your?
Well, not so much questions, is it just, I'm still trying to, I'd still like to see us keep the mill rate, the tax increase flat, mill rate. I'd like to see it go down. And, I think perhaps we can do it with a 105, but I'm just wondering if that's the right level. I guess would you speak, I guess, you provided, I guess some time ago that when you were at the 148, to get down to 1, you had 350-odd thousand or so, of reductions and so forth. Are those, I guess my question is, are those still on the table? Or
Well-
can they be?
They're on the table, I guess, so much in that you asked to see them. They're not on the table, quite honestly, in that I support them.
I understand that.
But, you would ask to see that information, and we have that information today, which is essentially what you had before, and because of the new baseline, we've adjusted. So this is what we hope to, quite honestly, avoid by coming in at the 1%. But we have this with some impact statements, starting with equipment, and then we're into various positions, some of which really help, quite honestly, to support the reform efforts that are going on. And I know you're aware you can't turn on the radio or look at the newspaper without hearing about the Common Core and the implementation challenges and teacher evaluation. And, it is a time that's very complex to manage, and some of these resources really are effective with helping us manage that change as effectively as we can over the course of the next few years.
Did you have a slide, or not a slide, but a handout for the non-educational collaborative efforts?
We have a binder tab.
I thought you said you had something additional though now.
Yeah.
And we have a
Memo.
memo that relates to the public act portion.
Can we keep going through with our questions, and then you're going to do that after, or? is that
So,
part of the
question about the slide.
before we go off with it, Nick
This is
just
for
handed
that
out,
time.
did we finish talking about whether or not, we understand you don't support them, but just to summarize, so people that are watching this can understand what we're looking at, the additional cuts involved existing positions, for the most part, and as I understand it, that extra, we're talking 300,000 of cuts is essentially, what, 1, 2, 3, 4.5 positions?
Yes,
And some equipment.
And furniture and,
Yeah,
correct,
and some equipment.
correct.
Right, so the first item is equipment request, 70,000, then it's all,
So that's a place we already dug pretty significantly into to get to the 105. So we would go back there and look for additional places to reduce. The challenge it creates, obviously, is you move it to another day. And we just seek to avoid coming back with an unreasonable need when we've tried to smooth where we are right
well, it's
now.
like deferred maintenance, if you don't do one, you eventually you got to do it.
Correct.
Pay me now or pay me later. So are we at the right level? And
Yeah.
so if we fool with certain items, we're not going to gain anything, because it's just going to come back.
Right,
so this would take us from a 1.05 down to a 0.5, that's what this means, okay.
correct.
Can I,
Also, as far as going down there, I mean, one of the things you tried to articulate is additional items in the budget, compelling reasons. There was some equipment in there, a couple $100,000, but you also has $500,000 in special needs.
Correct.
Now, if we didn't have that in this budget, you would probably be down to our request. You didn't have that need, if you didn't have,
I mean, those are needs that are current year, this year. I mean, we
Right.
talked about that we need to budget for next year. So all other things being equal, it would have looked different.
I mean, to me, I look at those as like mitigating factors. I mean, why, if we didn't have that, we'd be lower right now. You'd probably be a half point lower, and we'd be right down to that range, but we have some mitigating factors that cause us to not get to where we want to get to.
I mean, part of my reason for bringing this up again is that because there are also some mitigating factors and stuff going on over on the Board of Selectmen side, I've been playing around with the mill rate spreadsheet again, and I know we don't have that to put up there and so forth, but I'm just concerned that with all of the pieces put together, I'm not sure whether we really get to at least where my goal
Zero.
is, which is to start dragging the mill rate down.
And can I ask a question related to this that I asked last time, that I know you don't like this question, but
Ask it again, anyhow.
I want to ask it again anyway. I don't know, for lack of a better word, the inheritance money.
Right.
I totally understand why you wouldn't want to use a one-time funding source like that for FTE positions.
Right.
But for things like this first line item, which is equipment and furniture and, equipment and furniture, those are sort of one-time costs. So a one-time revenue source with a one-time cost seem to go together for me, as do some of the technology acquisition that you need, some of the new computers. So can you tell me what you're doing with that money?
I can tell you where we are right now. At our next Board of Ed meeting on the 25th, our staff's been working on different ideas in different ways that we can potentially utilize that funding with the goal of, and I have to say, I've been seen by many people that knew Miss McGowan and have come in and wanted to advise me on what the best way to look at this are and kind of honor her legacy. So a part of this, Linda, for us is to find a way to best honor the legacy. A piece of whatever we present will be a significant scholarship component. We're looking at areas potentially within our library and media centers to utilize technology and different learning tools. So while I don't see it like right now as I can take off X number of dollars, there may be a way that we meet needs in the future that help to mitigate in some way. But in the planning process, I haven't vetted these ideas fully with the board. They asked me to come back and present different ideas. I'm sure we'll have conversation. For me, it's a balance between how do you honor the legacy and how do you meet the needs that your district has. So, I mean, I think you can kind of come to a place where you meet both, but I don't really see it in a conversation right now where I can say, hey, we can lower this by 40 because I have $40,000 there. It just doesn't seem to fit right.
Okay. But if I'm remembering correctly, she did not have any written legacy, so it was just open money. So anybody's...
No restrictions on it.
Yeah,
You're right.
it's sort of somebody's guess as to what she might have wanted to do with it.
So it's us to try to create that, the Board of Ed to try to create that focus point and what we're comfortable with. Yep.
Okay.
I don't know if we had talked about the 125,000 for Chromebooks, and I don't know whether in CNR we had talked about other ways of funding those devices. I guess we're looking at capital non-recurring. You're saying they have a lifespan of 7 to 10 years?
Maybe they're relatively new technology, maybe 5 years, 4 to 5 years.
I said 5 to 7. We have historically funded new technology devices out of the operating budget. CNR has not been for the tech issues. It's been for more of the hard building equipment, grounds.
I just don't know what your
vehicles,
needs are
things
coming
of that-
up. I mean, I
things of
think
that
I
nature.
saw,
They have the schedule on capital non-recurring in the book
Right.
that shows what they're doing for that.
for already planned for next year. So I think I saw something about the roof replacement at Payne for the boathouse.
That's in the
You're
capital.
getting in the
That's capital
six-year
improvement.
CIP.
That's a
I
CIP.
wasn't seeing that, okay. For art and music, for example, and you talk about instructional equipment, I don't really know what that entails, but for music, for example, I mean, is
Musical instruments.
there a pay-to-play similar to what there is in sports?
For music? No. So music's a core part of our curriculum. So it has not been pay for play, and we actually did work with Dane Street over the past several months to really do a review of the data around pay for play, see where Simsbury lined up with pay for play with other districts in the state. Pay for play is very much less prevalent than maybe you would think to begin with, and Simsbury is very much an outlier in terms of the price we've put on pay to play. There's only one other district that has a pay to play as high as we do. So I don't know, I understand, I just don't know that now broadening that concept when it's already not readily identified
Well, it's interesting you mention that, because when you talk about instructional materials, I've always viewed athletics to be instructional at that age. And I had both my kids who played sports. I think they learned significantly a lot of lessons, life and in general, through the athletics program. And yet there was a pay-to-play program, and I never really quite understood why you had a distinction to charge for that, but not charge for someone who wanted to, for example, play a musical instrument.
Right.
And so I myself was a little surprised about it, but if you're continuing to maintain that distinction, I don't know why you wouldn't, at least in fairness, apply it across the board to similar kinds of instructional activities that I don't see as
CIAC
different
is a
now.
governing body that's out, I don't know, there's a lot of complexities of it we could delve into.
I think some of it is what's happening during the school day in actual
School.
school versus what's happening as an
Outside.
extracurricular outside after school.
Well, I mean, I guess, and maybe it's different. I always viewed playing an instrument to be an extracurricular activity, as you happen to offer it during the school day, but that's not a necessity more than anything.
Well, playing an instrument, sorry, I was a music major in college, and played the high school oboe when I was in high school here.
I played an instrument as well.
The comment that I want to make is, you don't pay for gym, and you get gym several times a week, you get music once a week, and it's just part of the core curriculum. So to have kids playing instruments, it really has always been
music
part of a
part of-
core curriculum everywhere.
Music's part of the
Is
core
music
curriculum.
required class,
Music in elementary school, K-8 is required.
but not in high school, correct? So it's not
Choice.
required in high school. It's a choice.
But are you
Just
going
like
to
it
charge
is
for
for-
culinary arts, or are you going to charge because you want the architecture course? Where do you draw the line when it's a class
I
you
know,
offer?
so why do you draw the line?
Well, where they're
To me,
not,
it's
they're
really-
saying
this is, to
sports
me,
after
is
school.
like, I understand the conceptual conversation, but this is very much at like the program shaping level, and I honestly, I don't know if this is the place to have that conversation.
Yeah, all I'm saying is I'm trying to figure out, dollar-wise, to Nick's point, how we begin to figure out, where it is, where you're making determinations. And, I, as a parent, paid over the years for my kids. I was happy to do so. I think there are a lot of people who'd be happy to do so, to pitch in toward their kid playing an instrument. You could have a financial aid program. You could have, $100 a year or something. That stuff's expensive. I think it probably is more expensive, far more expensive than running a soccer program. I don't know. But, I'm just trying to think creatively here about where you might.
I think some of the.
Just those conversations
Where
would
you're
take
going
a
is
long
probably-
time to vet, a lot of input to get, and I just don't know with where we are now. if
More of
it
a
would be-
long-term
Yeah.
planning, good thing to put on a
Like the
long-term
collaborative
planning.
conversation.
How do you do that? Because that's something that's gonna happen in the next 2 months
No.
for the budget. But it's a good point for long-term, put it on that list.
Right.
Why we do what we do.
Or you take a look at
Bring it back.
athletics the other way as well.
Right, you can look at it.
Bring it
both.
back into the core. I
I
mean,
don't mean
that's the
to
other way to look
micromanage,
at
I
it.
don't want to micromanage your budget. I'm just trying to,
right.
everything that has been offered up so far is a non-starter. So I'm just trying to think creatively, other things that could raise some revenue.
Now, I have some questions here from Maura. She wasn't able to make it, but I don't know if she gave you the questions that sent them to you. Burke, I don't know if she ever sent you that email, but basically, I'll just ask you a couple of questions for her. And they're broad questions. The first one was, what wasn't funded in this budget? So is there anything not in here that you wanted to be in here? What wasn't funded?
Our Board of Ed asked the same question, and, my honest response was that this budget provides what we need to move forward. The second piece of that is we are so incredibly in the throngs of the 3 reform efforts going on simultaneously. It is not an ideal time to launch anything of significance in a different way in terms of program improvement. We have a couple classroom sections right now that are right on that. This happens every year. You watch that enrollment. In a perfect world, I have a couple more FTE to allow me that flexibility. I think we really went to those guidelines, and when we projected out, we took every section that was within those guidelines. So, outside of some of the equipment, certainly, Burke, I would state that line item first. Those were things that were put in by principals into the budget that we then went back and created a process to reprioritize and move out.
on the follow-up to guidelines, she asked a question on how often is the data and research reviewed regarding policies like class size?
Yeah. Class size, we took a look at, I believe, 5 years ago or so, and we made a change to lower the guideline in second grade. The guideline used to be 25 in second grade, it's now 22. That's much more consistent with what other districts are doing. We haven't looked at the policies since then, but the data is reviewed at a Board of Ed meeting on an annual basis in terms of class size at the elementary level and analysis at the middle and high school levels of how many sections are over the guideline, how many are under, and we usually have a pretty healthy dialogue about how to focus our planning moving on from that.
Right now, these two questions kind of related. One of them is, what one-time reductions were used in this budget? So if you just, put it off this year and you're going to pay for it next year, what one time? And then, in reference, are there looming operational expenses in the 15-16 or the prior, next year's budget?
Right.
Are we avoiding anything that's going to all of a sudden rear its ugly head and have a huge budget increase a year out?
Right. I would say, it doesn't really feel like a one-time, but I think you have to look at the enrollment. You look at trends, but you look at it on an annual basis too, because we know that a reduction of 77 students aren't going to take place in one school where you can immediately absorb 3 sections. So I think this year, we were able to reduce, as I talked about already, 12 classroom sections, which offset the entire teacher salary increase. I don't know that it will look like that next year. An initial rollover tells me it will not, but we have to see how the numbers play in. So that's an area where I could see we don't have as significant a reduction that does not impact program. That's enrollment driven.
I would say they're not one-time things that we're going to necessarily have to pay the next year, other than the equipment that we mentioned earlier. But the one-time decrease in the number of bus routes, we won't expect to have that a second year. The level of insurance premium, don't expect to be that favorable.
Is there going to be zero again next year?
Next year, not sure what will happen with the instructional and office supplies. Again, that we're trying to be as frugal as we can there. We'll see what happens.
How about utilities?
Utility savings, I think I don't think we're likely to see.
I'm really asking, are we in the middle of like a 3-year electrical contract or something like that?
Large.
Electricity, we have 6 months of 14-15 is locked in, and we're actively engaged with a consortium to see if we can renew for a fixed rate for several more years. Our fuel, oil, diesel, gas, we have one more year on the collaborative bid with the town of Simsbury that we've done for natural gas. Most of those other fuels are just annual, and they're consortium pricing. So I don't have a sense that we're going to see decreases.
Okay.
The boiler replacement, that was already factored in? Another Henry James brother replacement was going to net some...
Right, that's the efficiencies of that are sort of factored in.
Already factored in? Okay.
Now, she had a couple questions on pay for play, but you've already answered those, so I won't ask them again. There was 2 related to some of that discussion, so.
Right.
She just had a couple of questions there.
I thought it was an outlier.
Just to make you feel better, my friends who live outside of Boston pay $450. Not that I'd advocate that for their kids' pay to play, so it's maybe unusual in Connecticut.
It's something
but-
that is all over the place.
Yeah.
Glastonbury, that has a massive athletic program, does not have any pay for play.
Yep.
So I think based on people's realities of where they are in this process, that's what you see grow out of it. And I
Yeah.
think you even see differentiation between sports like hockey that have expensive items like ice time and how to balance those things
Yeah.
out. So those are all things we need to think about and are already looking at, but not easy answers.
Yeah.
Are the Chromebooks, are they directed primarily toward younger grades or high school age kids or
Throughout.
throughout? I just don't know whether there've been any PTO, any thoughts about fundraisers. I look at the number of kids, I don't have a smartphone yet, but I look at the high schoolers and the very expensive equipment that most high schoolers carry into school with them in the way of smartphones. The parents are paying the monthly fees for them to have 24/7 access to the internet on their smartphones. most kids probably have laptops by the time they get to high school these days. So I'm just wondering on the Chromebooks, the 125,000, whether there are fundraisers or other opportunities for, if it's not going to be in CNR for.
Our PTOs have been great.
Great.
We've updated the board
No, I know they do.
annually on those
Great.
levels. They have provided iPads and document cameras and many of these things that we're talking about. They've helped to supplement, but there's a lot more magnitude than we can expect from them. And secondly, while we've embraced the bring your own device that you're talking about, there's a consistency that needs to be there in those devices. So you take the Chromebooks. Part of the cost is the Chromebook carts, physical carts that they go in. Part of the cost is actually a sort of management software that allows you to have the same and make changes more easily. And then you have the Google app. So there's a consistency factor that's built in there. And yes, you're right, those other things supplement people's, students' internet access to do research or do different things, but it's not a replacement for what we're trying to do here, which is to provide that ready access that we can guarantee that when we have these testing requirements with a whole number of certain grade levels at the same time, that we know and we can manage that those wireless access points work and that those students will have the right keyboard and the right mouse. I mean, that's the level that our IT staff is scurrying around now, making sure that we have just the right headsets to be able to take the audio portion of the test, that you have the mouse
It's a major undertaking.
manipulate what the math problem graph looks like. I mean, it's just not as easy as we get internet access.
No, I understand.
Through those different.
I raise it because I know the friends of the Simsbury.
So we are confident that these devices are the
I'm not saying that you
economical way
don't need them, I'm just
to go.
asking
Cheaper than
how,
laptops. Well, no,
asking how you fund them.
to your point, though, we've gotten away somewhat because laptops are more expensive. So Chromebooks provide that internet access, the keyboards. They don't have the storage capabilities, but that
Ready
seems to be
access.
the best of all worlds. So we're trying to think the way that you're thinking. in terms
No,
of
I'm not
what else
talking,
can we
yeah,
do.
no, I understand that you've looked at the actual device. I'm thinking about how you fund the 125,000. The library, for example, which is used by many of our senior citizens, a lot of the modern technology they've introduced there has been the result of the Friends of the Simsbury Public Library. They have funded a lot of that. They fund a lot of the technology needs. They fund a lot of the library circulation, DVDs, what have you. And so it's not borne by taxpayers, it's borne by other efforts. I'm just asking, again, we're talking about, I don't know, Nick, how much you think needs to come off the 1.05% when you look at the other budgets to bring it a 0% mill rate, but 125,000 is a big nut, so it's not going to take a ton of money in your budget, I don't think, to come close to what the Board of Finance asked you to do, which was to come in at 1% or under, and you're at 1.05. So I don't know what the 0.05 is, but
That's peanuts.
Right.
I'm just, I see people shaking their heads, and like, not to kill the messenger here, but I just know the collective discussion, this group, right, was to come in at 1% or under, and you came in at 1.05, so that's why I'm asking some hard questions about 125,000. I know, is there any consideration of how you might fund that other than in next year's budget?
Yeah, through our budget.
Other than next year's budget?
It has to come through. I think Bert did a very helpful explanation of what the PTOs have over the years, and they've gone above and beyond. And for a number of the technology pieces, which maybe I don't think you can understand the ramification of what the technology means.
I think I
for the school
understand,
system.
Lydia.
But-
I understand what technology means in the schools.
But-
I understand what technology means in schools, what it means in the library, what it means in town hall. I understand what it means.
And you understand the.
And our kids are
finances.
pretty tech savvy. We're in a pretty excellent community.
So Jeff, what are you
Kids have
asking again?
exposure.
What are you asking?
I'm asking if you
I just wanna make
consider
sure we
other
stay
ways
on
to
point.
fund the 125,000 in Chromebooks.
I didn't come tonight certainly, and it wouldn't come with an alternate idea on how to fund the $125,000 that I just presented, because I'm presenting within a one that I would want. That would take a whole different kind of planning, Jeff. I don't have that idea for you
Let
like
me ask other
this.
people on the board, are you?
Were that easy, I would have it.
Well, we're still asking questions, we're not passing judgment on the whole. We're just trying to ask questions about the budget, so can we still go through that process? I know I don't think everyone's had a chance to ask their questions.
I'm sorry about that.
I just don't want to draw a conclusion here. Now, on some of what we saw on pressures on this year's budget for the special needs, is there a pressure in the current year's budget, we're in 13-14, that's going to cause your budget to be upside down?
We are making every possible method of controlling costs to get through this fiscal year. So for example, the equipment requests that had been approved in the current year, if something wasn't purchased yet, I asked all departments to go back and say, is there anything that you can defer? So I got a list of things that can be deferred. So now that makes the amount of money for equipment next year that much smaller. There's more things competing. We have eliminated a position not only for the end of this fiscal year for the custodial maintenance area. We've reduced that total staff from 41 to 40. In every area of our budget, we're trying to curtail spending for the rest of the year.
So do you feel you're going to make it?
That is our belief. We're monitoring it month by month. And you'll be getting our next quarterly.
So basically what I'm hearing is you're making moves right now, efficiencies, and maybe deferring some things that are now impacting this budget we're talking about, the 14, gotta get the years right, 14, 15, that maybe you could have absorbed in this budget, but now you can't because of these special impacts on your budget, because they, as you said, they started earlier. They're not just starting the next budget season, they've already started. So you're absorbing those. So that, from our standpoint, I know we're going to have some discussion on the Board of Selectmen where there's some impacts on their budget that are impacting this year. So we're going to talk about that, but I just want to make sure your budget is okay the year we're in.
Certainly, comparative to last year, more challenges that we need to look at different ways to cover than last year.
I'm hoping that the 59 kids that didn't show up this year that you budgeted for will offset what some of the stuff that we were talking about.
I mean, I understand that question. It's a good question, but unless I took teachers as a result of that in current year, I can't.
No.
And we didn't do that.
I understand. They're in onesies and twosies all over the place. I understand that.
Not that I couldn't have reduced one section in particular, but it wasn't done, so I don't have that funding associated with
that's
that
part of the reason my focus on the number 77 in your current budget is I think so important, because I keep seeing the professionals say that number of the decrease will be larger, and my guess is that we may see a big number of decreases. If you took everything that is exactly the same as it is now and just moved each class one class up, you take the senior class out and you add in a new kindergarten at the same level as we've got now, you got a bigger number than 77.
Nick,
there's a projection, I think, built into this of in-migration.
Correct.
And it's hard to.
No, I understand what you're saying.
We're not experts in this. I mean.
Yeah.
So just so I understand it, is the NESDEC projection something different than?
The 77 is the NESDEC projection. So I can true that. I mean, maybe we can look at something after, Nick. I can true that
I'm
up
looking
for you.
at an old version of it, which says that we're going to see something like, we're going to see like 112 kids disappear.
But there isn't another source aside from NESDEC. It's just two different years.
Your friend Peter Prouda does this.
All right. So does he have a projection?
He has an even higher projection.
That was my question.
That it will a larger decrease.
But it's an old projection.
It's old. They're all old. Yeah. They're all done in like 2008, 2011.
So to get at Nick's question a different way.
Yeah.
If you had an assumption that your decrease would be 100 or 125,
right.
What does that really do? I mean, does that, I know you have to know what grade it is and everything else. I mean, I understand it's a complex question, but does that really give you the opportunity to knock out several more staff?
Maybe, maybe not.
We monitor, I hate to answer that way, but Jeff said maybe, maybe not. It depends on when that number comes into realization. It all triggers off the kindergarten numbers, and when your kindergarten numbers become true and you have registration. There have been times in the past where, say, we budgeted for 4 kindergarten sections at Squadron Line. We get to August, we have a class size at Squadron that's 27 in fifth grade. The K projections are light, you move that resource to cover that other place. So we've done movement like that. I can't say we've done it where we've actually eliminated a position, at least since I've been here, that late in the ballgame. But there, once we get to about this time now, we roll over the numbers, stop looking at projections, the next month or so, and are working off real rollover numbers and monitoring the staff. So there's a level of adjustment that takes place every year based on high school class enrollment, by class and sections, so.
But to come back to Peter's question, the
Right.
current year, I don't think anybody here at this table is expecting to hear you come in and say, we're going to be way over budget.
Right.
Is that correct?
Okay.
I mean, getting into what the next topic is, but on our agenda, but.
We would hope not to, and if I did, I definitely wouldn't go like that, but, we have some significant issues we're dealing with. Nick, when you talk about a increase of 6 students in that Ready, Set, Go program, and the model has an additional adult with each of them, and that wasn't budgeted for, that's major.
I understand.
So while I want to say we will cover that cost as effectively as we can, we're having to do some things we haven't had to do in recent years to do that. I guess I'll leave it at that.
There are opportunities for, it's going to be strange questions, probably my own ignorance, but project choice is an opportunity. I know if you can identify, okay, we don't have enough to cut a position, but our class size average is going to allow for an influx of 2 or 3 or 4 students.
Right.
You can bring in 4 project choice students, that's what, $24,000, not a lot of money you're getting.
Helps.
But given that our curriculum is more robust than certainly some of the other towns, even within our DIRG, I think, in terms of offering a much more comprehensive, my understanding, far more than like Avon, for example. Are there opportunities when you have identified those openings for for people to send their kids from other towns and just pay the tuition? I mean, for example, it'd be pretty good bang for the buck if you had somebody, let's say, who wanted their kid to take classes in an area at Simsbury High School that aren't offered at Avon or somewhere else. If they're thinking of sending them to private school for $40,000 a year, they could send them to Simsbury for $20,000 a year or $24,000 a year.
I mean, we don't market it that way. We have had situations in the past where we've been contacted, and what we would do is kind of review that in a case-by-case scenario, and that's a full tuition situation for the school district, but we don't go out in any way and proactively kind of recruit in that way. We don't really have a structure to respond to that,
I'm just thinking, given our great program.
Interesting concept.
Maybe, just a thought.
I think if you ever wanted to really explore that, you would almost have to create a subset or a magnet within your high school and kind of run it through that different kind of process and potentially work in choice, potentially work in state funds in some way.
Yeah.
Something conceptually we've thrown around for down the road as
outside the
more
box.
capacity opens up.
As far as questions, I had considerable questions. I called Burke and discussed them all budget, and you've covered them conceptually. A lot of them are just detailed. I feel comfortable that you explained all the questions. I had a few pages. I happened to, a couple of times at lunch, I could read your book and came up with some, so I got all the answers. But also something we didn't talk about, well, I guess you did, on some of the savings. You had some significant savings, I noticed there, and talked about plant operations with the modulars going out, so I assume those are going to keep going out, we'll still get those savings. Transportation eventually probably moves in steps. As enrollment goes down, teachers move in steps. I hear you can't do it every year, you got to look at it in a box, so that makes sense to me. Just looking at the pure numbers, you can say, gee, it's easy, let's just take it down this percentage, but it doesn't work that way. It's called step overhead, and there's a time to take it down the step, and you did a good job, I think, on the steps you did this year. So looking at the percentages, you did a good job. The big challenge will be eventually as this decrease hits the high school, because, if you showed us a few years ago, we had to hire 6 FTEs more because we put in 8 periods.
Right.
So now, what are you going to do with that when we start getting the decrease there? That will be your challenge, I see, in a couple of years, when the decrease hits the high school. But overall, I was pleased with your budget. I was delighted that I didn't think you could get down below 1.5 without really impacting programs. The insurance was fantastic, how both boards worked together. We've been working on it for a long time, and it was great that it came out of Burke. I think I called him every day for a while. He was probably glad that the number came out. So he was tired of hearing from me, and Sean Gimbel, but I was anxious, and I was delighted with the outcome. So it was a good outcome. Your budgets, in my mind, we asked you for 1 down to a half. 1.05, I'm not going to quibble over a few dollars. I think it's responsible. I think you, in my opinion, have, based on our diligence and the questions, I think you've really, you've gone through some hard choices. I think with the pressure you have in the current budget is forcing that too, because you got, a lot going on to digest it. So you're scrambling in this year to make it, and I appreciate that, because I know in times going by way back when, we had some times where we were told in October we weren't going to make our budget, and that wasn't a good feeling. And I appreciate you doing that effort. But from our board standpoint, our choices, if everyone's done with their questions, are...
I'm not, but go
Okay.
ahead.
All right, I'll let you ask questions, and we'll talk about it then.
Okay, I wanted to go back to the discussion about Chromebooks. Is there a potential, or maybe you've already realized this, that as we move to having kids more and more on Chromebooks and technology, that our textbook acquisition costs will go down, or is that already factored in there?
We reduced that account several years ago, but I think that would be a logical step to continue to look at. I think for current year, and Aaron, if you want to speak to this at all, we're at a comfortable level, but certainly, Linda, as enrollment goes down, I mean, that's another kind of enrollment-related area we'll need to continue to look at, and who knows how these resources evolve on the technology side and become more readily available. I know there was a lot of talk a couple years ago about online textbooks. That game's kind of changed, and what's become clear is that those are not free resources as many thought they would be initially. So I think it's continuing to look forward, discover, see what's there, but definitely an area for review moving forward.
Okay. And I also had a question about the 8-period day that got instituted a few years ago and did require an increase in the number of teachers. And I know you've heard me say this before. I mean, I have some concerns that a lot of kids are taking 1 and 2 study halls every single day. So they may have 8 periods, but they really don't necessarily need them all to get all those classes in that you were concerned about. And so I'm just wondering, is there an evaluation done or planned to be done to look at, do we really have to have, how's it worked out? Do the kids really have to have 8 periods, or could we go back to 7?
And an 8 period is pretty much a norm in what high schools are doing, and I know exactly what you're talking about. I think we're in a bit of a transitional period, and Aaron, jump in again with the credit requirements for graduation. Are we in our last year of students?
Right, I know I have.
So we're going from a 22 credit threshold this year for graduation to a 25
Right.
credit threshold. So that.
And that's why some kids this year have 3 study halls in the course of a day, which Matt's heard me light myself on fire about before. And so my understanding is that they'll no longer have 3, they'll have 2.
Right. I think that's a global swipe, but it must be specific seniors.
I can give you names.
Okay. But we can analyze that, and that's easy enough data to
And
pull.
I'm not
we
trying to be
do know.
critical. I just want to know, is it something that going forward, is absolutely, I'm sorry, let me interrupt. Could I ask the people in the, just because the lady here has told me that with the microphone right over there, it makes it impossible for her to hear when there are conversations going on out there, so. I just want to make sure that, we really have to have that extra period in there. And so I don't know if you're evaluating it or not, but.
That's stuff we can look at in enrollment on an annual basis. I think you'll see a significant change in the credit threshold that we talked about.
Yeah.
But
It was also driven by the high school reform effort that was initially slated for the class of 2016, and that was going to put off for the 2020 class. But we were working proactively to ensure that our students would be able to gain those 25 credits in time for the high school reform. But because of other mandates, it's been put off until the class of 2020. But we're well poised to meet that requirement. and other schools are attempting, high schools are attempting to move in that direction.
I wanted to applaud you for the page in here about regional and cooperative efforts with the town. And I'll leave it at that. I have some additional ideas of other things to put on there
Okay.
for future exploration, but I'll just share
I don't know if
those
some
with
of
you
the,
offline.
there's another layer of information on that Burke
I thought you said you had a
put it over there, Linda,
Yes,
somewhere. I
oh
don't know
yes,
if
right there.
now's
And we
maybe a
didn't-
good time to look at that.
And I was going to say, we need to
Yeah.
get to this
Yeah,
next thing.
So you've referenced the tab that highlights some of the areas where we are doing things with regional cooperation as well as county board. And this handout that I'm giving you isn't really something that's going to impact the spending for 14-15, so it's not a direct budget issue for the budget that you're looking at now. But what it attempts to do is give, and it's not an exhaustive list, giving a little deeper dive on the maintenance areas that exist for cooperation, as well as some areas that we continue to look at, and that's both the supervisor of buildings and grounds for the Board of Education, as well as the director of public works, myself, and Tom Cook. In fact, Friday there's a seminar that Tom Cook and I will be going to at Goodwin College about municipal cooperation, so we'll be going to that jointly. And so while this public act, and I know we'll be talking about it at future Board of Finance meetings, is about recommendations in the maintenance area. We have an ongoing dialogue in other areas, and we want to continue those.
And actually, this is a great list, because some of the things on here were on my list of things too, so that's great.
And I think we could do a deeper dive like this in all of those other major areas. This is really trying to make it easier for the Board of Finance under this public act to consider its recommendations to the Board of Education.
When could we consider, like, if we said, come back on these, I mean, I assume it's not going to happen in the next month or two? Or is that an invalid assumption?
I missed it, I'm sorry, Peter.
As far as a result, I mean, if you're going to do a study and come back with an idea, how long could it conceptually take?
It would depend on the
area.
degree of complexity. I mean, we've tried to show on the last page that there's issues that we have looked at and said it doesn't make sense at this time. There's some that we've indicated that, you know, we need to figure out more of the details, and it's something that you know, might involve actually adding staff to then in turn provide resources to both the town and the board. And then the last item seemed to be the one that would be more doable within the 14-15 budget year. But they're not going to result in significant cost savings. It's more about efficiencies of doing things going forward, avoiding costs.
Will we talk about the capital list in a separate discussion?
Yes, we have not
Okay.
been presented the capital, I guess, through the Board of Selectmen.
Or was it in here
And then it
somewhere?
will- that might not come to us.
Okay.
They have to decide what comes first. So that's their first shot at it, and then it comes to us, then we can talk about it.
And then potentially a public hearing on it, too.
Yes.
Right. Okay, so I just have one last question, back to that dreaded topic of the inheritance. You mentioned the thought of creating a scholarship fund. Would that be scholarship to pay for schools, college?
Yes.
So it wouldn't actually, so her intention was to leave money to the school system, but it would actually be used for a purpose aside from the Simsbury school system?
Benefit students that went through the Simsbury Public Schools.
Okay. All right, thank you.
Any more? Is that it?
So Peter, let me just add, because I didn't really have a lot of separate questions. I think we've covered a lot, and I too was pleased that you got it down to the 1%, because I think that's what we were targeted at. And I think the fact it's 1.05, Nick and I were doing that math, that's like 30,000 more. It would have been nice if you could have found that extra 30 somewhere, but
Thank you, Ken.
again, for 30,000, I don't think that changes our review or what we're trying to do here, because we're really looking bigger picture. So, I too am pleased with what you've come back with. I would just ask that the longer-term things like insurance and like the modulars and some of the
Right.
things you're doing to really cut costs going down the road, that we think about next year now, and what kind of programs can we start to look at, so that next year we can continue to keep, minimal increases while we continue to support the school system.
Well, anything new on the revenue side, ECS?
Still been
been
quiet since the governor's
relatively
budget.
quiet,
We've not heard
positive.
any
Yeah,
concern
you won't
about
hear anything from
changes.
Your numbers are, 3 weeks old or so?
Right.
3 a.m. on May 5th, whatever it is. Yeah.
Relatively flat though, right? Like $50,000 increase.
As far as what you
Same with
presented the
grant.
budget to us, our charge now is we can either accept it, turn it back and say we want you to revise it. We can just do nothing and let it go to public hearing and then make a decision. Because ultimately, we have to vote to pass it on to referendum. So we have to have a public hearing on both operating budgets and the capital. We don't have to make a decision on the budget till after that public hearing, when we ultimately send it on to the voters. So if we feel that strong against the budget, I assume we should talk about it tonight. If we're, everyone's comfortable with the range, or it's in a range that you're comfortable with, you can still formulate your mind, because, as we go through public hearing, there's still a process where you're vetting this out. It's not just, we have to vet it all tonight and we're done with it. We can formally vote on it after the public hearing, and then move the budget forward or do whatever we want to it at that time, because we just approved the bottom line. We don't
Right.
approve any line items, only a bottom line. So,
When does Mary present her budget?
25th.
25th, they're coming in.
And I guess I would say I don't feel comfortable saying I endorse or don't endorse
Right.
this budget until I see it in the context of, we set a goal of zero tax increase. So, hopefully, I am pleased with what they've done, and I think they deserve tremendous credit for working hard to get to where they've gotten to, but I still think we need to look at it in the context of the overall budget.
That will be happening. We're going to have, our next meeting is more helping us with reserves. I got some people coming in talking about reserves and why we do what we do for financing, and the auditors are coming in. And, we'll talk about reserve policy and things like that, and collection rate. So some of the things that we're going to do. Also, there's more information that has to be learned overall on the budget. There's still indirect revenues, an $8 million number is still being worked on. We heard part of that, that's the ECS, but there's still another $2 million or so of that we're not sure what the number is. So there's more pieces of this budget
Right.
coming together.
Yeah.
So it's not like you just have it all. There's more pieces we have to look at.
And we
And
haven't
that's-
seen the Board of Selectmen
Right,
budget.
and we see the selectmen, so I would recommend that we ask our questions. If we have more, I'm sure they'll take more questions later on. Burke's always taken any question I've had, I've called them up numerous times, and sometimes too numerous on insurance, but, they've been always gracious to take our questions, and if we just can't understand something, I think it's important that we get the dialogue and understand it. And so they understand what we're thinking and what we're thinking. Big picture, I think we ought to wait to the end so we see it all, because this is just one piece. It is a major piece. It's in the range. I'm happy with it where it is. 1%, I've been here 18 years. I've never seen it this low, so we're getting, we're trying to nudge it down to a range and keep everything in perspective with enrollment. If they told us we had 5% drop in enrollment, I might not be as happy with the budget. But we don't. We have a projected of 1.6 or 1.7%. So it appears reasonable, everything that they've done, and I think it's very responsible, what I've seen so far. An overall big picture, based on what I'm starting to see of the big picture, I think we're going to be able to make our goal. Yet, there's still some key pieces that have to be put in there. So,
I guess that's my only concern is that aspect. If we're gonna be able to make our goal, I'm comfortable. I think it is a responsible budget. I think they've worked very hard to come in with a low increase. I really appreciate your honesty in saying that you've not had to degrade programs by coming with this budget, because I'm sure there are superintendents out there who would pitch it as, we came in with 1.05 and come up with a million ways to Sunday to elaborate on all the reductions and, hardships that it will wreak havoc on the school system. So I appreciate that you can do this. I do, though, feel committed to maintaining our mill rate where it is. For next year, it's a goal that we established. So I just want to be sure we're giving the Board of Education and these guys enough guidance so that if you're looking at the numbers, and I apologize, I have family matters, I have not had an opportunity to crunch the numbers the way you all have. If you feel comfortable with what we're expecting from Mary, that we'll be able to come in with a 0% increase, I'm comfortable saying, let's pass on this tonight. If you think there's an issue based on how you've crunched the numbers and you think you need $50,000 or $100,000 more, which I know isn't a lot, I think, we ought to provide some direction if we need that. I'm hoping we'll have the flexibility of not
Anything,
needing to.
the only thing we can do tonight is move it on to the public hearing, or move it on as is, or move it on. We're not going to formally approve the budget tonight. We can't do that till after a public hearing.
Are there anything unexpected from Mary's?
Just make sure, do we have the ability to just wait on making any decision at all
Yeah.
until after we hear it? Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
So the
So
25th,
let's
we
just
hear
do that.
Mary's
Yeah.
presentation.
One year, we waited to the end, and after the public hearing, and then that was the year all-day kindergarten came in. I think we then took $200,000 out of their budget.
Yeah.
So that's happened before. I think we did that a few years ago, because the way things fit. But
So, and I think that one of the comments you made, Jeff, if we'll get to zero, it's not clear to me yet we can get to zero with this. So I think
Right.
there's still some more work we need to do. And as a board, we're going to have to make a decision, if it's 0 point whatever, is that all right? Or, where are we?
Well, and there are things, it doesn't, if we don't make it to zero, it may not come out of them. It may come out of, where we set our collection rate or some other
Right.
issue. There are a lot of moving parts here,
Yes.
and we need to consider all of them, so.
So I think for tonight, we're in a range, we're all relatively
Yes,
comfortable.
close. We're close, so we just need to.
Relatively comfortable. I don't sense any upheaval against the budget presented. We're not gonna, we can't formally pass it, we still have to hear it, we still have to vet the whole budget process. This is just one piece, it's a large piece. So it gets us in a range where I think we can make things come out, but every day they move. So you never know. So as we get further down the process, so I just thank them for their presentation tonight. And, the capital piece will come to us on the 25th, so we can vet the capital then. And capital non-reoccurring was in here, and there was no issues there, so I think we're, appreciate your presentation.
Appreciate the opportunity to talk through it.
Thank you.
We appreciate
Thank you.
the savings in insurance. So your goal next year will be,
-1.
you like goals. All right, we got to move on to the 13-14 budget update. Sean, is there some information you have for us?
Sure.
This is Glastonbury. So we're not the only ones being hard asses on education.
Sir? 2 pieces?
It's not clear where, from the article, it's not clear what Glastonbury's Board of Ed increase or decrease is. But the Finance Board, when it acted.
Want to get out of your way? No, you're sorry. No, I can.
So I was asked to, it's come up a few times, the issue of how the contracted salary increases over the last 3 years were budgeted. I know it's come up on the slide side. As Peter mentioned, we've been talking a couple times, just trying to figure out a way to lay this out so we can kind of explain it as clearly as possible. Obviously, there's a lot of moving factors. Thanks, Barry. The table you see in front of you on my memo shows the last 3 fiscal years, including the current. and the contingency reserve amount that was budgeted in each fiscal year. As you'll notice, so in fiscal year 2011 and 12, all 6 union contracts on the town side were up for negotiation. All of them expired and were not settled in that fiscal year. Like I said, most contracts expired June 30th of 11, so even before that fiscal year started. So we did not settle any contracts that year. Now, you'll see here, the next line down, $370,000, is the total amount that was returned per the audit from the Board of Selectmen expenditure side. Obviously, there's a lot more factors than just that, as you can tell by the fact that 370 is larger than 225, but just showing sort of what happened at that year end. The next year, we settled a number of, about half of our contracts, and at the time had to pay out both a retroactive salary payment, right, for the prior year, and also the amount you would need, the mid-year budgetary number you'd need to pay out the rest of that year from whenever that contract was settled, right? So you need both the increased salaries for that year
Yeah,
and
and the
also the
catch-up.
retroactive for prior. Okay, so that's what's built into the 379. It's not just lump sum payments. At the end of that year, though, we still did return, again, on balance, $62,954. And then in the last column, you'll have the current year. Again, the budgeted number was reduced, the contingency reserve budget, $150,000. Clearly, this was inadequate to settle out the $353,000 in again, retroactive and now 2-year retroactive contracts, and also the increased amount we would need budgeted for those salary increases. That means, as we've discussed or started to discuss or allude to in prior meetings, that when we look at what we're going to need at the end of the year, now, this 205 is including, it's a projection based on everything we have to basically this month, and everyone that's on staff and everyone that we're going to have and need to pay for the rest of the year. It's 205. That includes some efficiencies, positions that have been filled, such as the one I'm occupying at a lower salary. All those sort of things will factor into the 205, but we've done a pretty detailed projection, and we come up with about $200,000. That includes the overtime accounts, that includes the bad winter we're having with the overtime accounts, right? That 205 should be about the number, again, as long as we don't have any other major snowstorms or anything, come down the pike, that we would need to settle up. Yeah, like the one. It's not a Board of Finance meeting unless we have bad weather outside.
Yeah, we're gonna stop having meetings, because we keep
Yeah.
creating snow.
Yes, every
It's
time we
clearly a
meet, it's
correlation.
bad weather.
So I hope that makes sense. It's the reason it's not there. I'm not projecting what the year-end amount returned or not returned will be in that above line item. It's sort of a separate analysis there when you get to the current year. But and then I just thought, again, as somebody who helped negotiate these contracts, I wanted to make sure you see not only when these were settled, but also sort of a narrative, if you look at the bottom and the last page, of some of the savings, and they are very significant, that we're going to be seeing over the next 2, 3, and really 6 years. A lot of the union, almost every union but one, for instance, have increased their contributions to pension from 2% a year to 5% a year, phased in over the next 4 years, over a total of 6 years. But that's of salary. That's a significant increase. So the employees really have stepped up in these contracts. So I don't want this $205,000 transfer request to reflect just the impact of those contracts. There really are some significant savings.
The way I see it is, accounting-wise, unfortunately, we didn't leave the money open as an accrual, what could have happened, and it got turned back into reserves.
Right.
So it shouldn't have happened a couple of years ago. We shouldn't have turned it back in. So we have the money in reserves, and that's the big one. And then budget-wise, we're kind of off on our budget because we don't have the right base. So we created a budget issue. We have the money in reserves, and that's why maybe our reserves are a little higher, because some of this shouldn't have been turned back. It should have been saved as an accrued expense, so it could have got paid. And then budget-wise, we don't have the budget quite right.
That's right.
So I see 2 problems. Number one, we're going to, and you see on the list, another list, that we're going to be asked to take this money out of reserve, so I don't think you want it tonight. It's just for our information.
Right.
Eventually, we're going to have to do this. So this is like for everyone's information. Put this on that 1%, that 900,000 we have the ability to do.
Yeah.
We got some money we need. Second, I think, and I think, to be fair to the Board of Selectmen, their budget base isn't right. So what I think we ought to tell them, and I've had a discussion with Mary about that, is whatever that shortfall is, the 205, should be added into her base, how we analyze their budget. I mean, the increase is the increase, but just looking at it, it's fair to their budget to say, gee, this should have been in the base. So if you look at your base, it's really 205,000 higher. So, you're going to get to the same expenditure number, but increase-wise, now, this is about a 1.1 or something like that % increase to the base, because the budget's like 18 million something.
That's right.
So, if they're asking for whatever they're going to ask for, I'm not sure what they're going to ask for. But let's say they're asking for 2%. If the base was up 1, they're really only asking for less than 1.
Right.
Because we got the base wrong. So that's the way I see it.
So Peter, I think if we do that, though, what we have to be careful to do is restate history. So we've been saying there were 0 increases in prior years, there really weren't. Because if we restate the base this year and lower this year's base, then we absorb those increases in prior years. So I think we just have to be fair in how we show it, so that, maybe this year's increase isn't as high, but we had increases in prior year where previously we weren't saying
What I'd
that.
like to do is I got to get up in front of the taxpayers and say, here's if we say, here's our goals, here's the parameters, did this budget make it? And what I'd like to do, and we've done it in the past when we put OPEB in, we kind of one-lined it. So we did a presentation where we said, this is the OPEB that we mandated, so I'd like to go back to the base and say, here's your budget for last year, put 205 in the base, for what last year you're comparing it to. Even though in total, we're going to ask for this total amount of money. The base is really, what we're comparing it to should be a little higher because of this situation. So to be fair to the Board of Selectmen, I think that's a fair way to do it. But overall, the increase is the increase. I mean, it's not going to change.
Right.
And that's what they're going to vote on, the total budget. They're not going to say, gee, we're going to vote on 205,000 less. We're going to vote on whatever the budget amount is. But just comparability of budgets, the budget got out of whack a little bit. You can see how it did it. We have the money in reserves. That's no problem. That's why we have good reserves, and that's why it's good to have a little cushion, because believe me, I've seen a lot of problems in 18 years here. This is
This is relatively minor.
This is minor. I'm not as worried. I mean, first of all, I thought it was more, and I was a little more concerned, but 205 is a lot better number than 400 and something like that.
Right. Now, for what it's worth, it certainly created some budgetary problems. As you can see, the police contract was settled. It's two largest departments, police and Public Works / Parks, those two unions, were settled. If you look on the bottom, June 21st of 2013, the police contract was settled. Good news is, in that year, we got to pay out the lump sum, right? But you'll notice June 21st is already after referendum, so the budget was already passed. So when we went to prepare this year's budget, the base salary was as if this was 2012, right? These were basically almost 3-year, salary rates used to build that budget were 3 years old. Could have padded that with an increased contingency reserve budget, but it wasn't done there. So, and you don't want to necessarily show all your hand either. So that's just a reality of what happened. The same with AFSCME, which was settled this past September. So when we went to prepare Tom Roy's budget and the chief's budget, we were starting, before we added or cut anything, with a 6 and 7% increase just to pay our existing folks. And so
that's a big number.
And that's of two very large departments. Yeah.
Right.
So it was a challenge.
So it looks like accounting was accounting snafu. Thank God, Sean, everyone figured it out, and with the new Joe coming on board, hopefully we won't have this problem in the future.
Can I ask a question from
Sure.
the accounting perspective? Had the 370 not been returned to reserves, but had been, you said, carried as an accrued expense?
Well, normally what you do is the 225 would have been carried on,
Right,
and
not
you
the
would
370.
have kept that in there to pay it. So you wouldn't have returned 225 of that 370.
I see, so you would return that. So had you not returned, and then in last year, 215,
And then we should have budgeted a little higher on the contingency, because again, you haven't settled. So when they had 379, they should have had like 400 some odd thousand in there in contingency. They should have budgeted for that, or a piece of that, based on what they were settling. And then this year, it should have been more than 150 as they settle in.
got it. So the money going back into reserves, though,
Too much came back in the reserve.
too much came back into reserves,
Yep.
and it really almost showed as if they didn't need the entirety of that money
But they really, right,
years.
but they
But they
didn't.
did
But
need
they
it.
did need it.
Yeah.
So it's not really their budget in those years. Like, you gotta go back and say, well, because when they came in with their budgets came in at what they thought they needed at the beginning of the year. At the end of the year, they turned money back, but the money back
Well,
was
they didn't
Not
have the
real.
contingency in there.
already reflective of.
Yeah, they didn't have the contingency in there. They needed
Okay.
right, they should have, right. So
Yeah.
if you had the two, it's about 400,000 of contingency, would have covered that.
But when we show year-to-year increases, we don't do it off, we show it to actuals, not to budget.
Oh,
So,
we do it the
Right,
budget.
when they come in their budget at the beginning of the year, they always state it as .02 or .0, or whatever it is, and they ended up turning some of it back at the end of the year. So I guess, I agree with your approach, Peter, which is to restate the base.
Well, he's talking about for presentation purposes.
Presentation.
right.
Right.
I mean, the budget is what it
Right,
is.
it
They have a
is what it is,
responsible,
Yeah.
you know.
Semantics.
But I mean, it's just, from our standpoint, are we gonna sit here and say, gee, you're coming in with 2% and we want 1, and hammer the life out of them? And
Yeah, it's
the reality
impossible.
is, there was, 1% of it, at 1.1, is because of an accounting problem.
Right, so the money got returned back.
So to be fair to the Board of Selectmen, I don't wanna hammer them.
Right.
I
You know, if
agree.
they've been responsible and met our demands and
Yeah.
come in, then they did. I mean,
Yeah.
you know, when we got this back, I almost fell off my chair when I saw the audit report come out, because we weren't, our board was told there was like a $75,000 turn back. And all of a sudden,
Excuse me, Mr. Couchman, could you please not talk while?
75,000 became 370 when I saw the audit report, and we never got a explanation. Nobody got an explanation. So now we know part why. I was just waiting for the other shoe to fall, and now it has. So I said that was too good to be true, and it was. So now we're going to pay back, or at least we have the money.
Yep.
So,
Thank God for accountants in the board. Certainly not me.
municipal accounting is very complicated, as you find out, and Sean's learning quite a valuable lesson, I think. And he's hurting his pay.
Thank you. Yeah.
It isn't like operating one checkbook, that's for sure.
No, it's not.
It's like, I told him, it's like running 7 businesses at once, and there's all stuff flying between them. It's unbelievable, the accounting, and the accounting profession's made it so complicated, it's very hard. And then we got budgetary, and so,
But Peter, more importantly, on the sheet that's got the one page, this is what we ought to be thinking that we're going to have to do sometime
right,
in like June.
yes. Yeah, there's four things on here. You got the agreed upon procedures, which we had agreed to do the 14.9, I guess that's the number.
The bill I just got, yeah. I
Yeah.
thought it was 14. It says 14. It's the bill we just got, so
Great.
must be 14.
Simsbury Farms has been in the deficit. We have to make that whole. We should technically make that whole before the end of the year, or transfer in the
Yeah.
summer for the year. So we should have been given a heads up to make that whole, not find out that it's a deficit. This year, we still might have an amount for Simsbury Farms, unless they come out in a positive. We're going to be asked to do it as part of this, too. So this is just the prior year, the 255 negative, or prior 2 years. And then if there's a 630-14 deficit, we're going to be asked to do that also. Because otherwise, if we have reoccurring budgeting deficits, the rating agencies are going to penalize us. You can ask them at our next meeting.
Okay.
You know, we have to be careful of that. So my concern is that we get this
Right.
right.
You have to raise
We're the
the base.
backstop. So if it's out of sync, we have to make it right. So that's why we're going to probably focus on Simsbury Farms a little this year, to try to make sure they get that right. The winter, you know, the salt is extraordinary. That's not a budget issue, that's just a
Hopefully, it's a one-timer.
extraordinary
Yeah.
one-timer.
Tough
The
year.
payroll is a prior budget issue, which we got to make whole, because what are you going to do, not pay people? So we have to do that. So 550 is already in the hopper. We can only legally transfer up to 900,000 with that 1% rule. And if there's another 85 or so from Simsbury Farms, we're up in the sixes. So just remember that. So if we make
And what was our limit again?
1%.
1% of the budget,
1% of about 90 million. so-
90 million. So we have
So
a
we got
statute
one.
we come under, and it's about 1%, so it's about 900. We can do without going back before the voters.
Well, and that also is why we have reserves and we set the collection rate to be able to have some of this flexibility.
Now, this year, with the collection rate at where it is, let's say we make, when the smoke clears, $1 million, $1.1 million, and it doesn't sound like there's going to be any turn back on the expense side, because the Board of Ed's scrambling, the town is scrambling. So everyone's scrambling, so normally we've had some turnbacks on expenses. I wouldn't count on any.
This year,
It's only
that's
revenue
right.
driven. So if we got $1.1 million there, and let's say we put out $650, we're still gonna make some money to reserves. So the rating agencies look at how we do. Do we operationally are in the plus or not? And so that's why when we set our collection rate, you know, we have to really make sure that our budget's right, because if we have to solve some problems, you know, we could put ourselves in a deficit for that year solving them. So it's just, we have to remember that, but that's okay. These aren't reoccurring deficit, you know, these are just, some of these are hopefully once in a 20-year problem.
Hope so, yeah.
So I, you know, but there's always problems, there's always something. We've had various things come through, and there's always some needs. So nothing would surprise me.
Sean, do you know anything new on the collection rate for this year?
I do. I have, well, I'll be giving you guys that information on Tuesday, but we did get good information for this past, the February collections came in. I think you remember my memo last.
You were
I said we
hoping they
got
would catch up.
1.5 in order to catch up. We got 1.4, so it wasn't the 900,000 we got the prior year, so that's was a relief. We're still slightly off last year, so I'll have that for you on Tuesday, but we're about, we've crossed, first of all, our budgeted number 98, where I think we were at 98 point, I guess it was 98.45, I believe. So, but I'll be handing that out on Tuesday. I did want to ask if I could, I know Mary had to leave, there was a request by the full Board of Selectmen on Monday at their budget workshop to get a little guidance from the Board of Finance on coming in with the 1% and the 0.5%. So as a sneak preview, and you weren't far off, on Monday night, the Board of Selectmen was at 1.98%, is where the budget has been cut to, and I say cut because there's still a lot of tough cuts in there. Obviously, that's baking in the correct salary numbers as they need to be. If you take that 205 out of our base, so to speak, it's actually a 0.86% budget, which looks a little better presented that way. But I think there was a request of the board, and Nancy, feel free to correct me, but I believe to ask the Board of Finance whether, with that information, you would like us to still try to show a 1% and a 0.5%, or
Well,
whether
Restated, you're down to the 1, I mean,
we're down to 0.86.
0.86 or under 1. If, you know, if you had to go to 0.5, what would it look like? I mean, like, the Board of Ed gave us a couple of points. What's the pleasure of the board? What do you?
I guess I feel pretty comfortable, 0.86. I know just some of the increases that are necessary from renegotiated contracts, insurance. I don't know. What do those think?
I don't know how we can say anything. We haven't seen anything yet.
Yeah.
So I'm very uncomfortable
Well, no, but they
having
just-
different parameters up front.
Yeah. they're
Because
looking-
we haven't even seen a rough draft of theirs. We saw 3 versions of Board of Ed.
Right.
And so we knew where they were starting. So now we know for the first time you're starting at, what, if you're saying 0.89, I would say, can't be that hard to just tell us if you had to go to the 5, which was the original instructions, what would it be?
Sure, yeah. I think there was just some sensitivity to, a lot of those involved cuts to existing personnel, and there can be some morale impacts to that, and it's not that we can't do that, but I think the board, we just wanted clarification, given some of that back and forth. and the
We-
information.
I think almost in fairness to the Board of Ed, if we made them go through, we kind of have to make you go, sorry, but,
I guess my,
and they had the same argument, it's morale, but,
Right.
you know, I think people know it's an exercise, that, you know, they're not going to get totally wigged out about it.
I mean, the starting point is up 1, so we're not starting at 2%. We'll get the starting point at the, whatever you say it is, the 0.86, but if you put the 205 in comparison, we'll use that as a starting point.
Yeah.
And,
So you're going from 0.86 down to 0.5.
I guess that's my
0.5.
question.
So you're looking at
is, do you want us to do
0.36.
that exercise, or should we,
Yeah.
if we took our 2% down?
No,
to
no,
0.5, we're really
0.86.
gonna
From
be-
0.86 to 5.
0.6 down, I guess we just
Yeah.
want to know what would get cut. I guess the similar parameters, though, to the Board of Education, which is that we're not looking to see any degradation of programs, so we're not looking to see our seniors impact, we're not looking to see our library hours, cut dramatically. I mean, I think we're not looking for degradation of critical services, and so I think we didn't require the Board of Education to cut critical services. I think across the board, in fairness, I want to be sure that
But they did give us a proposal that would do that.
No, I understand that. We can ask for that down to the .5. I mean, .36 is how much money in the budget?
It's about 50,000, I think.
About 50,000. I mean, the Board of Ed is over by 30,000, so,
Yes, yeah.
Yeah.
you know, so
Yep.
we can go through the
Well,
exercise,
it's under
but,
one, so they're already at the one.
yeah.
Did you put the insurance savings, I assume you put the insurance
Insurance
savings in
savings
it?
is all factored in. The other piece that Mary brought up earlier, though, is this question of the second
Police
SRO, right, the school resource officers. So, in some ways, the full budget is really at, and I know I'm not trying to jump the gun here, but at about 2.2%. It's 1.98% if the town and board are able to share that second SRO as well. So, again, this will all be presented formally, but we're trying to, just
So
get
we
sort
don't
of-
have a second SRO now.
So there are two SROs. The town has originally there was one at the high school. The town has paid for that SRO up until last year when they added a second SRO, and it was agreed we would split the cost of the second one. But the town is still paying the full of the first one.
And why do we have two police officers? What, I don't know.
Safety
So the
associated?
second one's at Henry James, and that was just a
First one's at the high school?
collective decision. post
Right,
Sandy.
but what do they actually do? I just don't know. They won't just walk around looking for bad guys, or I thought the first SRO was more of a interaction, getting to know the kids and.
Safety and education.
Yeah.
So I primarily safety and working with the police department when situations arise, but also interactively involved in educational programs, juvenile review board, different aspects of those kinds of things. But that amount of 40,000 was pretty close to the approximately 50. That would be that 0.3 difference if we're talking about, sort of that $205,000 starting mark as our base being in there. Just as a for instance, I mean, if it's a.
Can I ask a question? On as far as putting it into the budget, has Mary talked to Matt as far as made this request?
I think they've had some discussion about it, and Bert, feel free to jump in. I think it was too late in the game to have it included in the budget that they've presented so far, so I think the idea would be, if we could work out how that would work, it could go, I think the same way that the second SRO was added late in the game last year as well. If we were, given that we now know where our budget is coming in and whether 1.98% is more appropriate than 2.2%, I think we'd like, if possible, to see that same logic applied to both SROs, and if you guys permitted the Board of Ed to increase their budget by 40%.
But from our perspective,
It's a wash.
it's a wash. It doesn't
It's 6 to 1.
accomplish anything.
Right.
But I mean, your board has to be, they've been asked, and they're gonna make a decision?
Yeah, the Board of Education members haven't been asked.
Right, they haven't been asked,
Superintendent
right.
and the first
Right.
selectman have had some informal conversation. yes.
So I think we gotta let that go through its process. I mean, we can't step in and let the two boards work it out.
And is that a filled position already, or one year?
Yes.
Yep, yeah, we have two officers out.
But it would be logical to account for both of them the same way.
Yes.
I mean, we're talking about two individuals who are in the school system for what, 2/3 of the year? I mean, the rest of the time, they're pulling other normal duties, right?
But the problem is, one board's asked the other board hasn't actually been discussed it, so we're kind of got the cart before the horse right now, I think. I don't think we can, you're just for our information, and
Right.
we appreciate it.
All right,
So
and if they're able to work out.
hopefully, the boards can work out and decide what they want to do.
Sure.
So we appreciate everyone working together, so it's, like I said, it's always something.
Not unlike corporate America. We forget,
everything runs
what
smooth.
cost center gets charged and who benefits the most and all those.
So do you have what you need from us, the 205 base, the comparison, come in with what you're gonna come in with, whatever your board is, show it down to the
.5.
.5,
I was going to say, I think
And then-
both bits of information help. The fact that you've had the 205 discussion and we know where our starting point is, and then that you do want us to see that 0.3 difference to be down at 0.5.
I think you should look at it, Nancy,
Yeah.
just, you know, go through the exercise, we asked them to do it.
In fairness, I think, yeah. And I think where we were was, not having had that 205 discussion yet, we weren't sure if we were coming from really what would have been a 1.98, and that's quite a bit of difference to go down to 1 and 0.5, and now we're just talking about a 0.3 exercise, one exercise versus, yeah.
Right, so you hear what you had to hear from us?
Yeah.
So I don't think we need to pass any motions, but it's just, they understand how they're gonna present. So we're clear on that. Good, thank you. And this sheet, don't lose it, because that's the score sheet. Eventually, we're gonna, a couple months from now, we're gonna be using, so hopefully the numbers go down, they don't go up, but you never know. Now, we have another item on minutes, but the lateness of the hour.
Oh, yeah. Right. And I have one other quick item, which is the Economic Development Task Force. You wanted a volunteer, do you need?
Yeah, let's just do the minutes and we'll
Okay.
stick that on. You wanna do the minutes? Or you wanna do it next?
I think we should do them, we
Okay,
put it off for 3.
Let's do them,
Okay.
all right?
So I apologize that this is as lengthy as it is. A lot of this is just cleanup, clarification, getting names right. But I wasn't allowed to do that offline. I was told that it had to be done at a meeting in
I was
audience.
gonna say, just give them to.
Yeah, I tried, and I was
No.
told that town policy says I can't.
We can't do that.
Okay, so Matthew, I'm in December 17th, first paragraph. Matthew Curtis is not referred to as superintendent of schools. You should append that he's the superintendent of schools into the minutes. Also, in all the other minutes, you refer to him as Matt Curtis. I don't know what the proper reference to him is, but it should be consistent in all our minutes, and you should probably find out, does he want to be referred to as Matthew Curtis or Matt Curtis, and we should handle it consistently.
Project title, what do you want?
Superintendent of schools is what 2 of the 3 minutes say, and the first one doesn't say anything. So again, it's more of a consistency in how we put the minutes together. So I suggest you add superintendent of schools. And as far as names and names of committees, I would suggest that they're all listed on the town website. You'll see Culture Park and Rec gets called all different things in these. I think we need to consistently call it whatever the official name is on the website, so it's clear in the minutes who we're referring to. So paragraph Roman numeral, or number 1, election of chair and vice chair. We asked for a formal written opinion on the question. There was no ruling to have anything on, so the word ruling should be changed to question.
Where are you? I don't.
Roman, the first
December
one, it
minutes.
says election of chair. It's in the second sentence. The board is requesting a formal written opinion on this question rather than this ruling. I'm now on page 2, paragraph 4. Second paragraph, just for clarity purposes, Ms. Pettigene suggested that the board request a cash flow schedule for the capital plan for a projection of when cash will be needed by the Board of Selectmen and Board of Ed. So it's that I requested it, not that we look at it, but we requested a cash flow schedule, and then it's for the capital plan. Paragraph 5.
For the capital plan, period.
That's fine, either way, or you can leave the rest there. It's not really necessary, but it's not wrong, so it's fine to leave the rest.
Can I just suggest that when you're done doing this verbally, you give this to her so she gets it
Sure.
exactly the way you want it?
Sure, I can hand it. Paragraph 5. I believe Mr. Askham noted at the Board of Select approved this transfer at their meeting, not after their meeting.
Right.
I don't think they can approve things after a meeting. Okay. The next is covered what we had there, and now I'm on the last page in section 7. Go all the way down to the final bullet, and the bullet is entitled Goals for 2014 to 2019, BOF Actions.
We're in number 7.
Second, all the way at the end, there's 2 bullets.
That's well, yeah. Well, the first one says goals for 14-15 budget.
Okay.
The second one says goals for 2014 to 2019 BOF actions. I'm in the second bullet. Mr. Askham requested that BOF work with BOS and BOE to look at an action plan. I think there should be a period after that, because we weren't doing anything before the next meeting.
So take for the next meeting off.
Yes, please.
Barbara,
Yes.
back in
I missed
7,
one? Sorry.
the it says Mr. Escom listed these budget issues, and it says goals as a way to possibly decrease tax rate. You know, it's under goals for 14-15 budget guideline for Board of Selectmen. It should be Mr. Escom listed these budget issues, period. No goals as a way in possible tax decrease. These were the budget issues. That's what I think the sheet was labeled that I had.
Okay, sorry I missed that. Okay, tell me when you're ready, so back to paragraph 8. Paragraph 8, again, this is just a request going forward. Can we do this in complete sentences wherever possible? There's a clause in here that says, would like to see a driver range from BOS and BOE. I don't, and it's capitalized like a term of art. I don't know what a driver range is or what he was trying to say, so unless we want to clarify that, I just suggest striking it.
Yeah, these are reading, those are
I think we asked to see budget drivers, and that wouldn't be capitalized, but I don't know what a driver range is.
I think he's talking about percentages or dollars in
I
a
think we
range.
talked about the top 10 drivers of their budget. That's what I was talking about.
Okay, so we would like to see the budget drivers instead of driver range, and that shouldn't be in capital if it's budget drivers. Okay, that is all I had for the December 17th. Does anybody have anything else?
Okay, thank you.
January 23rd?
You want to do these one at a time, or what?
You want to
I'll
make a
move,
motion to approve the minutes?
I'll move the December 17, 2013 minutes with the corrections.
I'll second that.
Second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Okay, we got one set of minutes. Good.
Okay, January 23rd.
Thank you.
Paragraph 1, fiscal year operating budget, the first paragraph under that, third sentence. The BOE is looking at some scenarios rather than looking for. Second paragraph, Matt Curtis discussed lower enrollment, which has impacted the staffing levels, so delete also affected and put in has impacted. Staffing levels,
Hold on, can you read that again, please?
delete in the second paragraph, first sentence, also affected, cross out, and input has impacted staffing levels in the school system. And then take out the word lowered by and add in reducing it by approximately 7%.
Reducing it by approximately.
Yeah, approximately is there, so take out lowered by and replace with reducing it by.
Yep.
Now, skip down to where you have Mr. Mason in bold. The next paragraph after that starts Mr. Kelly, and I'm in that paragraph. The end of that paragraph talks about average indebtedness. It's average indebtedness of the community, so strike the words for members of the community. So it's not what individual people owe, it's what the towns owe. Okay, Mr. Chris Kelly.
I got it, never mind.
So it's striking out 4 members of the community.
Barb, above that, the third paragraph on that page says Mr. Michael Goldman. You got Goldman, it's Goldman?
Yep.
Okay, so it's Mike, he's good. So you changed that name to Goldman?
Yeah.
Okay, good.
Because I had kind of
Yeah,
done these
right.
prior, so I'm
Right.
looking at 2 copies.
Right. Oh, that's probably why it's a little hard to follow, because most of these I already gave you.
Some I changed
Yeah.
already, yeah, so I'm
Okay.
going. one.
Okay. In the capital improvement paragraph, in the second sentence, which board, it says which the Board of Finance has set as a policy goal. I think it should just say has set as a guideline. So strike
Nope.
policy goal and replace it with
You lost me.
guideline.
Which paragraph you in, Barb?
FY15 capital improvement budget, that's the bold heading,
Okay.
and I'm in the third sentence.
What's it start with?
I'm in the second sentence, actually. Ms. Glassman noted that they have asked PFM Group,
Yep.
partway through that sentence, that the Board of Finance has set a policy goal. It should say the word guideline instead of policy goal.
Okay, I got that one.
Okay, paragraph 2. In the,
Motion?
yes, in the motion, it should be, it was passed unanimously and cross off with Mr. Blumenthal voting in absence.
Yep.
Paragraph 4. In the motion, There's no reason to note that Mr. Blumenthal was absent at every motion. He's just not listed as attending, so it's a given.
I think we covered this last.
I know, but they said they
Yeah.
can't make
Yeah.
any changes
I
unless we
understand.
do this, so that's why I'm doing
We
it.
got a letter from the town clerk.
Saying that we couldn't give it to her offline and let her make the changes.
No, I understand.
Okay. Second paragraph. She suggested closing the,
Paragraph under what?
this is just a grammar correction.
What
Paragraph
page?
5, I'm sorry.
5, second paragraph, Ms. Glassman?
Yep, and the next sentence starts with, she suggested, this is just grammatically, but it should be, and finally adopt the budget. It's not adopting. Would just be adopt. Take out the ing. It's just grammar.
How about Mr. Kimball, the next sentence, the second one, option B? Is that, no, okay, I just highlighted that because I was just reading it, all right. That wasn't a correction, I'm sorry.
Okay. Next page, paragraph 6, under my comments, this is what I think I said. The first sentence should be, Ms. Pettigene expressed her concern that she does not have enough information on the Board of Selectmen budget, period. Cross out, and that is because, and then start it with an initial cap. She does not know what contractual obligations are driving the budget at this point. So I'm adding in the words, at this point, period, and then cross off the rest of that sentence. And then we're starting with the next sentence. She noted that the Board of Education, take out the word did, and change it to shared. Take out the word that. They shared their preliminary budget. Put the word preliminary in. And take out the involves. And instead, which has an increase
Hold on.
over 1%.
After I'm changing budget to preliminary,
A preliminary budget,
preliminary budget.
which has an increase over 1%. Then take out everything.
Hold on. So am I taking out increase of over $1 million?
Yeah, the point was they were already over 1%. We were talking about, should we have a +1, -1, or 0?
All right, so read that sentence for me again.
She noted the Board of Education shared their budget, their preliminary budget, which has an increase of over 1%. And then the next sentence, cross off everything until you get to the next sentence that begins with Ms. Pettigene.
So start at the concern.
Nope, take that sentence out too.
Take what?
Take that sentence out too.
That starts the concern.
Yes. So the next sentence that should be in is, Ms. Pettigene agreed with asking for a 1% and 0%, but felt that asking for -1% from the Board of Education this year, and you can strike everything after that, should just say, is not practical. So you're crossing off the rest of that paragraph. In the next paragraph, Mr. Askham, Peter, did you say that we
Well-
built them to 12 to 15? Was
The
that
third
right?
sentence, Mr. Askin said that he would not have a problem with -1 to 0 to 1.
Right.
So
to
we didn't put the
+1.
+1 in there, that's why you gotta add the +1.
Yeah.
See where you have the numbers,
I see
-1.
-1 and then a +1.
You got -1 to 0, it should be -1, 0, and +1. So there should be 3 numbers in there, because that's what we talked about originally arranged.
-1,
0,
0,
and +1
and a +1.
as a guideline, right.
So Peter, did you say in the sentence before that reserves were built to 15%? Or just under 12? The 12 to
No,
15
he was
a
talking about,
goal.
he was talking about a range, the 12 to 15 would be the.
I know.
The
Range of
range
reserves.
goal, yeah.
Right, but that's not what this says. It says
No.
that the town has built the reserves
No,
to
they
12 to 15, is what
Town's
it
built the
says.
reserves at 12, but we could see a range of 12 to 15.
Okay, so,
That's
so
what
the
it-
town has
that's what
built
I'm
the
talking
reserve to 12, period. If you want to add another sentence, you can, but we haven't built them to 12 to 15.
No.
So just cross off the 215. On the next paragraph, paragraph 7, I would suggest it's switching the last two sentences of the paragraph. So it started with Peter, the conversation was he's looking us to vote on the goals. And then Ms. Pettigene noted that it, and I say will be instead of is, difficult to choose 3 goals from the list, so not with the list, but from the list, the way it is currently formatted. And then the last sentence should be, Ms. Pettigene and Ms. Schofield volunteer to organize these goals into a manner that would, and take out, give the members a list to vote on, because they had a list to vote on, but that would make them easier to address.
I'm sorry?
That would make them easier to address.
She's going to hand it all to you.
I am, and you can call me if you can't read my corrections. Committee assignments. I think the first sentence should just read, Mr. Askham noted that Mr. Blumenthal stated he would like to work on the annual report committee. And that's just fixing the grammar of that sentence. And the last sentence, to just, again, I'm fixing the grammar. Ms. Glassman will get back to the members, I would just say, on the timetable. And then the next paragraph in the same, I'm still in paragraph 8, the very last sentence. It says, Ms. Pettigene will be on the Public Building Committee. That's actually a committee that one can't serve on unless they're appointed by the Board of Selectmen. So it will be Ms. Pettigene will continue to follow the Public Building Committee.
Now, in that same paragraph, second sentence, second line, Mr. Mason and Mr. Askham will stay on the retirement subcommittee, so it's not Mr. Blumenthal.
Yep, I got that.
Okay, you got that? All right, yeah.
And then this is now committee names. I'm down in other business in the second paragraph. It starts Mr. Mason. Mr. Mason stated that he would like to follow up with the, I think it's Culture Park and Recreation Committee. He noted that Simsbury Farms, and I would just put in now has a 5-year plan and put a period there.
Yep.
And then take out the rest of that sentence. And the next sentence, because they're just redundant. And that was all the changes I had.
I have a motion.
On that one, though,
So
can you do
moved.
me a favor and go through Culture Park and Rec, and every time you do that in your minutes, just do a spell check, because you'll see you call it a bunch of different things. There's one, in one of these, you call it Cultural Parks and Recs instead of Culture Park and Rec. So if you wouldn't mind checking, that's one that seems to get wrong.
We got to come up with a 3-letter word for that committee instead of the whole name.
CPR.
That's what they call it.
Do they really?
Yeah. I've seen them do it. Or at least Jerry Wetchin does that all the time. CP ampersand R.
The budget needs some CPR.
That's not,
Okay, well.
come on, that's.
Late, it's a long night. Long week so far.
So do we want to approve them as amended?
Did somebody want to make that motion?
I'll move
So
it.
moved. Second.
Second, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? No. Minutes passed as amended.
So just a request going forward, not so much to try and transcribe what's said, but more to get the gist of the meaning of what the conversation flow is would be really helpful. And maybe just, if you read some of our old minutes, you might have done this already, you can see the style that they were in. They read very well and they were easy to follow. So it might be a good process to just try and keep them simple.
How about the 18th? Do you have anything on the 18th? Or you wanna
I didn't
wait?
get the 18th.
I thought it was fine.
So let's,
Did you get was the 18th out?
Yeah.
Yes, it came with all the rest of the stuff.
I did that first, didn't I?
No, you did
No.
January.
Oh, I went backwards?
You did
Oh, there's
December
still
and
another one?
January.
Okay, well, then this is where Culture Parks is wrong. Okay, first page. grammar again, paragraph 3. After a colon and where you're listing items, you can't re-inject the sentence again, so just cross off the words "with the board members." So it should end with changes, period. Paragraph 7.
Let's go back to 5, the last paragraph of 5.
Where-
Says-
Wait a
on
minute.
page 2.
I'm sorry.
You didn't find mine here.
No, but the changes is in there twice. Where you're just taking off
She's
with the...
reading the label of each of the exhibits. One was
Yeah.
called 2013 prior to changes,
Okay.
another one's 2013 with
Okay,
changes.
so you're just taking out with the board members?
Yes.
Okay, I'm
On
sorry.
the second page, 5, last paragraph, the Board of Finance asks the Board of Education what a further reduction to a 0.5 and 0% increase would look like. Because we changed it from the net -1, 0, 1. Right? We told them that to go down to 0.5 and 0. I think that's what we told them, right?
Yep.
No, I think we said go down to 1 and 0.5. Well, I can't remember. I'm sorry.
Yeah, I think it was 0.
Yeah, I think we had 0 in there, just to,
Well, you know what, Peter? I don't think we did.
no?
We originally had +1, -1, 0. And when we redid it, didn't we redo it to a 1 and a 0.5?
Yeah, I think you're right. Is that what we did?
See,
Yeah.
this was before they took out the insurance thing, and
Yeah,
and they were
0.5
they were
to
at
1, okay.
1.48.
Right.
So with a further reduction to a 0.5 and 1. I know we had a range.
Yes.
So we came with a revised range because they wanted to come in and talk, because the original range wasn't realistic, so we came with a more realistic range.
Okay, paragraph 7. That's where culture, parks, and rec is called cultural parks. So do the spell check in that paragraph. And then, Peter, just a question.
It's in a couple of
Simsbury
places.
Farms has a revenue fund, is that right?
Yes.
They're special revenue.
Okay,
Special-
so currently, so it was decided to set up a subcommittee, that's just fixing there. So, the very last sentence, I just want to get the meaning of it right.
Last sentence where?
Same paragraph, cultural parks and recreation, it should be cultural parks and recreation. Would also like to do a special assessment to, it doesn't mean they're members, would it be the golfers?
Yes.
Instead of the
Yes.
members?
The
So
golfers.
to the golfers, by increasing golf fees and have, instead of it, the assessment restricted, and should it be for golf course use only rather than
Yes.
for their equipment?
Yes, golf course use only.
Okay, so cross off their equipment and put in golf course use only. And cross off it to be the assessment, and members should be the golfers.
But Nick and I still volunteer to be on it, so we've met.
Can we change that?
Can we get off?
So like in the second sentence in that same paragraph 7, you call it cultural parks and recreation, and you left off the word committee. So just go through and see what it should be called, and make sure each time we say it, it's called the same way.
It's not a committee, it's a department. And it's the Culture Parks and Rec Department of the town, isn't it?
Well, no, there's a committee.
No, there's a
called-
committee.
There's a committee too that Jerry
There's a
Witchens
Culture
on.
Parks and Rec Committee. then there's a
Yeah, you're right, I'm sorry.
And I guess the question is, what are you referring to? Are you referring to
Yeah.
the committee, or are you referring to the department?
Yep,
Committee.
yep, okay.
Okay. Paragraph 8. This just struck me, and I didn't know if anyone else thought clarification was appropriate. Ms. Glassman noted the town is trying to get state bonding for the senior center. Isn't it just for the senior center study?
No,
No,
no, she
So
got,
we're
we
gonna have
already
a
got
free
that.
senior center?
We've already got the...
Right, we got the bonding for the
That's
study. This was for the senior center.
Yeah.
Right.
That's
They
what-
actually went-
Okay.
She's looking for broader sources of
Okay.
funds.
There was a bill introduced, and they went
Okay.
down and testified.
Got it.
won't get funded.
I know it didn't.
And then, this is just kind of grammatical, but paragraph 9, goal-setting discussion, the third sentence, instead of wording it, it was also mentioned about the possibility, it would be better to say there was also discussion. So when the group is talking about something, just there was discussion about, it's kind of a style that, that has been used a lot. Okay, going to the next page, all the way down to Roman numeral 2-4. There's an extra little bullet in there.
We'll put you in our proofing department.
Yeah, is there a way for our
Other boards have
scribe
always
to-
done it.
To have someone like you do non-substantive
I offered, and I got
reviews?
told I couldn't.
Now,
That's why we're doing it
On the next
tonight.
page, on page 5, on 6,
Seems like a
that
waste of
first
time.
bullet, when we talk about solicit their input regarding price.
Where are you, Peter?
Elasticity of demand, is that what we did?
What number are you on?
Page 5,
Number what?
point 6, Board of Finance communication, create and implement a better plan for communicating with taxpayers about town finances and to solicit their input regarding price.
Elasticity of demand.
Is that that was what we said? All right.
Well, I think
That
that's
was in
the,
your- that was
that's
in
the
your-
phrase that I used,
Okay,
yeah.
all right.
That I think she just cut and pasted the stuff
Just put it in,
that, our
okay.
handout, that's what it looked like to me, which is fine.
Yep.
I believe that's it.
Okay. A motion to accept as amended?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
Second. All those in favor?
Aye.
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 Any opposed? Minutes carry as amended. Thank you. Now, a couple little housekeeping matters. We're going to have a picture taken of our board on the 25th for the annual report. So we're going to have a picture of all of us. So they wanted to come tonight, and I said, I don't think we're all going to be there, so I believe Moira's going to be there, hopefully Jeff, 25th, so plan accordingly. There's a committee set up that Linda volunteered for the what's it called?
The EDC task force? or-
EDC
I don't know
task
what it's
force, yeah,
called.
EDTF, that's it. And we have to just, is that okay with everyone, just to get.
If anyone else wants to do it, they're
Yeah.
welcome to it.
I'm okay if you do it.
Yeah. So, it's all
Are
right
you
with
good,
the board
Nick?
that Linda, I don't think we have to formally vote on it.
No.
But just Linda's been appointed as our representative on that, because they needed one from us, so they wanted it more formal, so I said, all right. And let's see, also one other thing, SCTV, I've been asked to speak with Matt Curtis and Mary Glassman on the 28th at SCTV. So we're going to be talking about the budget there. And as you know, we have the public hearing on April 10th, which we have to come up with our presentation. So we'll start working on that once we go through the 25th and have everything.
On the
We'll start-
21st, did you say?
28th. 28th.
Oh, 20.
28th. So we have SCTV wants to have the three of us there, so that will be at noon on the 28th. So we'll start the process of articulating the budget to the taxpayers, and then we have the public hearing.
Will we know by then, though? So you're assuming that we vote on the 25th?
No, we have to go to public hearing.
Public
We will,
hearing.
we will
Well,
know
right,
what the
but-
proposals are, so
I know what
that's,
the proposals are.
that's what he's talking about.
Yeah, but Board of Finance is talking about what the net mill rate increase
Well,
would be.
well, just think about what you want me to talk about. So we'll talk about next meeting, but I'm going to talk about our goals. I'm going to talk about what charges we've sent to both boards, what we're trying to do with this budget, and depending on what we have for a budget, where we are. We don't know. Hopefully the worksheet comes out favorable by then. I don't know. But whatever facts we have at the time, we'll talk about. And say we're going to have a public hearing and present it. So we'll talk about what we're trying to do and so any suggestion, give them to me. I got my list, so I'll be more than happy to, we have a half hour. I'm not sure how long we have, but.
Are you
we'll talk.
planning on following the style or the sort of the content that Paul used to use for the public hearing?
I want to change that a little.
Shorten it?
Yeah, I want to do that, but when Joe comes in, he's got to make me some new slides. I want to do us comparability of other towns, mill rate. I want to do, also I want to put in our goals in there too, and then try to shorten it and then let them make their presentations. So I'll run it by everyone when we make that presentation for April 10th. I believe that's the public hearing.
Yes.
So we'll talk about that next meeting, all right? Motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. We are adjourned. Thank you. Sorry for the length.